Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody today? I'm looking in two spots today, so sorry about that. Thursday, we're here. It's election debate day, and I have a special guest.
Good morning, all.
There she is.
I'm here.
There's Padge. I hope you can hear us both just fine. Go ahead and say hi, Padge.
Good morning, everyone.
And look, I'm going to be facing this way. Do you guys mind if I switch my camera so it's mirrored? This way it looks like I'm facing my wife. There we go. There we go. Hey, Padge.
Not that you go to mirror me.
That's true. I'm going to have to mirror you too. Look at that. We are just live. We're doing this. There we go. Oh, the Canadian flag's backwards now. All right, now look at me.
Hello.
Hey, that works. But other things are backwards. My Canadian flag's backwards. Her Canadian flag is backwards. So we're going to have to live with that. But my book is backwards. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Let's see if anybody chat. We do have good morning, Motown, my pen pal from Twitter. Good morning, good morning. And everyone, we call her Paula around here. Her name is Paula. And of course, Susie as well. So I guess that would make up to everybody. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, here we are. We got Padge, Chicken Lady in the flesh. And I think the video for her is far better than mine. So I'm going to try and find a way to get another one of those cameras. It works well. So we're here for the Alberta debate. This is an extended episode today where we should have Tim Moen join us. I have reached out to him. He did say he was going to come. I did send him the link yesterday. He did see the tweet, and I sent him a link again this morning. So I think we're good to go. I would have liked a little bit more confirmation, but he is very busy. He's a firefighter, so I'm pretty sure we'll see him. And if we don't, that's fine. We'll just cut it at 2 hours as normal. But good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. I can't show you my weather cam because that's on Paula right now. But you can see from behind, we've got some clear skies coming, a little bit of overcast, no rain right now, no smoke at all in the sky. It looks like we are done that chapter for this year. So the smoke is done. You want to say good morning there, Padge?
Good morning. Apologies in advance for the croaky throat and any sniffing. I'm still on the tail end of getting better, but far better than even Monday. So I'm glad for that. And I think the smoke not being in the air anymore has certainly helped the last couple of days. And not the only one who felt the repercussions of poor air quality in the area. And
you had juvenile asthma.
Yeah.
So how's that affecting you now?
My lungs are shot. I can't run long distances. Stamina's pretty good for like walks and things like that, but just general bursts of exertion, I'm not very good at that at all.
You gonna be able to make it through 2 hours of talking?
Oh yeah, the talking should be fine.
Well, good morning, babe.
Good morning.
You got your coffee?
I've got my coffee.
Okay.
I got my coffee.
Okay,
Although
now
I give tea, but for 6 in the morning, it's coffee.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you need that little shot of caffeine now. Ellie, let us know if the audio sounds good. We can adjust any of it, but thank you very much. Oh, it's been a long week. But the election is coming. So, did you know about it?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
One of the things I was disappointed on is that we've only had one leaders debate, and there was only planning to be one leaders debate. I thought that was a bit weird. I thought, give us 2 at least. But no, the one we had the other night was it, and wasn't going to be another one, and all they just have is their little subsequent appearances afterwards. Because I think Notley was in Edmonton, or did one in Edmonton the next day.
The speech, or
yeah. I got to listen to that yesterday.
You have to listen to that. She's been doing her research.
I did
folks.
a little bit of research because we are new to Alberta fairly. I don't know the history of Albertan politics. So getting a little bit of a background on it was kind of helpful, but I think as a new resident, I think it's just going forward, we just have to see who we've got today. What are they offering us today? What is their plans for tomorrow? And just make my judgment on that.
Maybe it's possible they only had the one debate because we already know who Notley is. She's been around for a while, was premier already, and we have Danielle now. So I agree with you. It would have been nice to have had a takeaway, had some points from the first one, so you can come back and circle back and bring them back and maybe address them again or have a second shot. But the provincial election when it was dropped is pretty quick. It's not like the U.S. election where they got months and months and months of campaigning. It happens pretty quick. They only got weeks. And could Notley have done any better or worse after
always,
the first
I think
one?
always worse. You can't always do worse, but the better, I don't know. I think people's minds are typically made up when it comes to party preference.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think for someone like us, just to have an idea of what is the opposition, what are their views, what are they like as people, and impressions from them, is useful. But I don't think I've ever been a swing vote, so I don't know. I think overall I've always kind of known which way I've been leaning, and unless someone has come up, my leaders come up with I'm completely for or against this, which is opposite to what I believe. I think most people are like that. I think they're just going to go with who they've typically gone with before, unless there's some sort of major catastrophe coming from their representative.
Right. Now, when we were in Ontario, you were quite politically aware.
Yeah.
When? Did you like her?
No, I did not like Kathleen Wynne.
Why?
I did not like what she was doing in schools, even though at the time it wasn't. I don't think we had kids at that time of Kathleen Wynne. Maybe JJ was young. Didn't like it. She rubbed me up the wrong way. I didn't agree with what she stood for. And yeah, there's just some people, like we were watching Tim Pool yesterday, and they were talking about how DeSantis doesn't have charisma. That is an important part of a leader, to be able to not necessarily charm their constituents, but to at least relate to them, to at least make him seem appealing. That I want to vote for that person. I like that person. I like what they say.
So you can find her relatable. Then.
No.
Okay, and is that important to you to feel relatable to your leader?
No, but I've got to be able to sit and listen to you speak.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't need to go out and have a drink with you, but if you want me to hear what you have to say, you've got to be appealing enough for me to be able to sit down and take the time to do it.
Now, your move to Alberta, was it a big shock to you politically, or was it something you were appealed
No,
to?
I don't think it's been a shock politically. It was a relief for the community, because you know how I felt about leaving Ontario.
But they don't.
True.
I know you, but they don't know you.
Yeah, I loved living in Ontario until COVID hit. I found it very, very claustrophobic after that, and they were encouraging scaremongering for the residents. Don't go out, don't do this, you're going to get sick. Which is fair enough, because people got sick. But coming to Alberta was literally, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Just from attitudes being similar to ours, to just the general way of life and how we wanted to be as a family. It's been great. One of the best, of the many moves I've made in my life, this is definitely, I think, my favorite.
Yeah,
sure.
You've made some big moves. You're global.
I've moved continents. I've moved lifestyles. And yeah, no, Alberta's fantastic. Great place for me as a person, and great place for my husband, and more importantly, our children. It's been a great move.
It's awesome. What was one of the last things you saw of Ontario as you were leaving? And by the way, I'm looking here because it's easier for me to see your eyes here, and I don't know if that will help you there.
The last thing I saw was the lineup to get into Ontario, because as we crossed into Manitoba, which was just clear roads, come on in, Ontario was like, show us your papers.
Yeah, it was a checkpoint.
There was a checkpoint and lineup to get into Ontario. So I was like, bye.
Yeah, nothing all the way to Alberta. Not a single checkpoint. Just a red light or two, and that was it.
No, and what they call dust devils.
Oh, well, that was Saskatchewan where you saw actual tornadoes. Those were tornadoes. Those were not dust devils.
Yeah.
Those were full-blown tornadoes. But yeah, welcome to the prairies when you get to see that.
Yeah.
Did that bother you?
You know what? I am a little sheltered when it comes to tornadoes. So we're driving along and like, there's a small tornado in that field over there. And so it was a little bit off-putting, but we subsequently had a little tornado on the...
That was a dust devil.
Yes.
Yes. The one we had here on our little mountain here was a dust devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, dust devils are usually 6 to 12 feet. And tornadoes are much, much bigger.
Yes. Yeah.
And how are you liking your little piece of land?
I love our land. I love the fact I can walk it. I love the fact we have wildlife on it, although there's one particular four-legged creature that's not welcome right now. We have chickens, and there is a fox in the neighborhood.
There was a fox in the hen house?
Yeah, there was, literally. There was, literally.
And your dogs protected them?
My dogs did squat. My well-established knows-better dog was nowhere to be in sight, and the pup, well, he's a pup. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But they'll get there. They'll get there. But it's a brazen creature. It really is. But
it is. It's brave. I've seen it maybe 4 or 5 times now. It's right into our property. It comes right in. No problem. Daylight. No problem. So yeah, we're gonna have to deal with that problem. But I think we survived the night. So
the girls are fine. The dogs are fine. So
okay. Well, I think that's what everybody tuned in for, was to hear about the fox in the hen house. Actually, it's quite interesting. But we are definitely all queued up and ready to go. So what we've done is we've taken the entire debate and we've got all the commercials out. So there's 2 commercial breaks and broken into the 3 segments. And we're going to go through them, watch them. We'll pause. Go ahead and say pause when you want me to pause, or just talk over at points. But the whole idea is to pay attention to what they're saying, digest what they're saying, analyze what they're saying, and then have your comments, and we can have some banter on that. We'll see where that goes, okay?
And also apologies for any eye rolling. I am an eye roller.
She can be, for
sure. There may be, they should have a little eye roll count, a polar eye roll count.
All right. So segment 1's about 15 minutes, and with the pausing, it should be about 20, 25, but we'll see how that goes. So enjoy the replay of the Alberta debate.
And here they are right now. From the United Conservative Party, Leader Danielle Smith, and from the Alberta New Democratic Party, Leader Rachel Notley. Welcome to you both.
Also asking questions tonight are members of the Debate Consortium. Lisa Johnson from Post Media, Courtney Theriault from City News, and Judy Aldis from CBC Alberta.
Now, we have 3 main topics to cover tonight: affordability, healthcare, and the economy, which, according to our polling, are the top issues for Albertans. We also have a 4th wildcard round. In addition, both CTV and Global News have been solicited questions from you, the voters. We've gotten hundreds of submissions and pared them down to 2. Aaron and I will put those questions to the leaders.
And there are some rules tonight, and here they are. Both parties have agreed to all of these rules for tonight's debate. Each leader will have 1 minute to make their opening remarks. Over the course of the hour, 10 questions are expected. Each will be directed at a specific leader, who then has 45 seconds to respond. The other leader will have time for a rebuttal, followed by free debate.
And there will be an all-important countdown clock that the leaders can see here in studio, with 30 seconds left in their answers, so they know when it is time to wrap up. And as we near the end of the debate, each leader will have time to make their closing remarks. Well,
the speaking order tonight was determined by a random draw. And a reminder to Ms. Smith and Ms. Notley not to talk over one another. We want to ensure that the discussion can be heard clearly for our audience at home, and we're not going to hesitate to step in to ensure that that is the case.
All right, it is time to get started. First up tonight, Danielle Smith from the UCP with her opening remarks. Ms. Smith, you have 1 minute.
Good evening. Elections are about making important choices for you and your family. This election, Albertans have a choice between a UCP government that has lowered taxes, balanced the budget, and returned Alberta to its place as the economic powerhouse of Canada. Or we can choose to go backward with the same failed NDP policies that hiked taxes, drove out jobs and investment, and almost bankrupted our province. We can't afford to go back. We need to go forward. If elected, the UCP will continue to make life more affordable by cutting your personal income taxes and extending the fuel tax holiday. We'll crack down on criminals with more officers on the ground and ankle bracelet monitoring of violent offenders out on bail. And we will continue to invest in healthcare and mental health addiction treatment while ensuring no Albertan ever has to pay out of pocket to see a family doctor. Alberta's opportunities are endless, and I know our best days are still ahead. Thank you, and I look forward to the debate.
Ms. Smith, thank you so much. The floor is now yours, Ms. Notley, for your opening remarks.
To begin, I want to thank our firefighters and say that my thoughts are with those Albertans who are out of their homes right now. Tonight, I want to talk about a better future for Alberta, where we fix healthcare, lower household costs, and create jobs. This election is about trust, and it's about leadership. You know you can't trust Danielle Smith, so my offer to you is this. I will work every day to be the premier you deserve, creating jobs and diversifying for the future. I won't raise your taxes. I will cap your bills. I won't fund a war room. I will fund an emergency room. And I won't ever make you pay to see a doctor. I'll protect our healthcare, protect our mountains, and protect your pension. And having learned today that Danielle Smith broke the law, I will also protect our law, and I will never break it. When I say something, I mean.
Okay, hold it.
So yeah, we had to pause and replay this live too. She said protect our mountains.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
I have no idea. Is there some sort of evil plan in play, drill holes through our mountains to get a more direct road to BC? Like, I don't actually get that one.
Might have been just a misspeak
Or
then.
pipelines. I have no idea what that reference is. But yeah, one of the things I've found listening to Rachel Notley's appearances and who watched the debate is that with all politicians, I have this question, but I find it more with her in the scenarios, is how. I plan to do this. I plan to do that. How? How exactly? And that's one of the things that I haven't heard from her when she speaks, is to actually tell us, how are we planning on, you're going to promise us the moon. That's great. I love the moon. But how do you plan on actually providing it to the residents of Alberta? I find more when Danielle's spoken is that, yes, I plan to do, bring more police onto our streets and she's always kind of given a little bit of follow-up by doing this, whether they're getting this type of investment or they're restructuring whatever. I find typically with NDP as a whole, but particularly listening to Rachel, how do you plan to achieve this? Yes, of course, we all want police on the ground. We all want better healthcare. We all want a better school system and education for our children. How exactly do you plan to achieve this, especially when you're not going to be raising taxes, you're not going to be doing this? Money's got to come from somewhere. And we're not typically like the US where we just press the print button. Like, where is this money coming?
We are.
Where is this money coming from that you're promising all of this, which are great things? No one's ever going to complain about what a politician is offering us. Never.
Well, we're going to highlight quickly here what Peter said. Best Gordon Lightfoot song. My vote is Alberta Bound. Right on, buddy. Good morning, government. Corrupt. Nice to see you, Kevin. Thank you for showing up in the chat this morning. Really appreciate that. And then Azario DeSantis. Great policy, needs coaching to be approachable.
Yeah.
Got you. One thing I didn't like, well, there's a few things, but one thing that caught me was her capping. We're going to cap costs. So I just want to explain that to people. What that actually means is it's government interference in the pricing of a market product. And capping it means they're going to hold the price to a certain height, a certain top dollar, regardless of the drivers for the cost. Mm-hmm. So if it costs more to produce the electricity to the electric company, they won't be able to recoup that from consumers because they're capped. This government interference on utilities is going to, by almost definition, drop the quality of the services, because if they can't recoup from consumers, they're going to have to recoup by cuts within the utilities. And this is one of the things, because we've had to do this ourselves. our own well, our own solar, our own septic. Could you imagine trying to cut the cost on those services and what it would mean to us? We would have less batteries. We would have maybe not as good quality well. We would have possibly a problem with the septic, or we would have to have other costs associated with it. When I hear a government official say, hey, look, I'm going to put my fingers into the market, I'm going to adjust the pricing because I want to make it fairer for the people that have difficulty paying. The challenge to me there is, well, you're going to affect the service for everybody. So for everybody, if they're going to start having brownouts because they can't afford enough fuel because the costs have been capped, we all suffer. I think a better approach is to make it more affordable. So when a politician says, I want to cap it, they want to put an arbitrary number on it. But when a politician, like Danielle was saying, make it more affordable, it means that for the people that can't pay for it, which is a segment of the society, we address their needs and their problem. We don't market, regulate the price away. So that's a challenge to me. And then this is also what she tried to do before, and this is what had to come off, because the caps does deteriorate the quality of the service. And she's promising to do that again.
Yeah, and one of the speaking points, which is going to come up later, which I'll touch upon, the children insurance. Ontario did that as well.
Okay, well, we'll get to that one, because you're an insurance
we'll
broker.
get to that, because I can then also say how it's went
Sure.
in Ontario.
You can remind people the history from Alberta or from Ontario.
Yeah.
So Zario, I think we got this one. Great. Okay. Let's see. And then Peter. Less value for our tax dollars. Wonderful, right? Peter, is what we all want. Oh, corrupt. What do you got to say, buddy? Government wealth redistribution is like taking a blood transfusion from one arm just to give it to the other while spilling half on the floor in the process. Don't forget, it also has a chance to do any modifications to that blood supply. So maybe you'll get your vax as well there, Kevin. Thanks for the comment. All right. Well, we're only into 1 minute of Notley.
It's, to be fair, it's going to be from both.
Remarks. Well, affordability, rising interest rates, and inflation have been top of mind. Big issue for a lot of Alberta families struggling to make ends meet.
The first series of questions tonight are based on that issue, and question number 1 goes to Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
Thank you. This first question is for UCP leader Danielle Smith. We've been dealing with an affordability crisis for over a year. We have seen temporary measures put in place, including rebates and affordability payments, which are only applied to some Albertans. What will you do to support all Albertans with the rising cost of living as inflation?
Sorry, I need to pause here because that question I didn't like. She's talking about affordability for some Albertans. That's exactly what it should be, because not everybody needs it. There's no way you need to do affordability for everyone. So this particular question is a very Notley driven philosophy, because she even followed it up by saying some people are getting affordability help, but what do we do for all? Explain to me how this lady herself needs affordability assistance.
Exactly.
I would love to understand how she, just her as the individual, how she needs the government to step in and answer.
Maybe she needs to cut out her Disney Plus subscription as well.
That does help. That does help. That will definitely get Canadians back on track. But anyways, I think this question not only is it loaded, it's coming from a NDP talking point, which is let's give money to everyone. Regardless if they need it. Let me know what you think in the chat when you hear these kind of questions. Are they trying to set her up to look bad to the dependable base, the base that needs to be depended by their government? But I didn't like that question at all. Sorry for jumping in on that one.
Knew we needed to do was address the inflation crisis created, let's be fair, by the Liberal NDP coalition in Ottawa, spending too much money, driving up the cost of everything. And there's only so much we can do here. So we gave $600 affordability payments. We gave a rebate on fuel taxes to offset the federal carbon tax. And we also made sure that we were going to put on electricity rebates so that people paid less on their power bills. What we have to do going forward is more than that. We know we're going to continue to see an increase in the federal carbon tax. That's why we're going to offer an 8% personal income tax rate. Brings us pretty much in alignment with Alberta or with Ontario and British Columbia. It'll give $1,500 per family, and we'll also extend that fuel tax rebate until the end of the year.
So the difference is there is she's providing rebates to the people that can afford it
Yeah.
instead of changing the price for everybody. That feels right to me
Fair
because
enough. Yeah.
that's where I do think subsidies and assistance from the government can help people who do need it. It's not a blanket cost reduction.
Yeah, blanket, everyone gets a check.
Right. And just to be clear, we don't get one because they put it on the utility bill.
Yeah.
And what do we not have out here?
Utility bills.
Yeah. So this doesn't impact us, but we understand totally how it would impact other people.
Thank you. You know, under the UCP, the fact is that most Albertans' utility bills look more like a mortgage payment. And your insurance costs for your car, well, that looks more like what you save up for your whole summer vacation. Now, those costs were under control when we were in government because we had put caps in place to protect Alberta families. Unfortunately, the UCP chose to remove them, and now costs are spiraling. So we're going to help. We're going to put a cap back on car insurance, not a pretend one like Danielle Smith did a couple months ago, but a real one. And we're going to help families reduce their utilities. And most importantly, we will never, ever, ever make them pay to see a family doctor.
All right, Ms. Notley, thank you. We're going to open it up.
So you're going to hear her say that a lot about the family doctor one. For some reason, she really thinks that that is a good sticking point. It only works on her base. That won't sway anybody over.
No, having a family doctor is important. However,
no, but paying for it is what she keeps talking about.
One of the things, and I don't understand personally. Moving to Alberta, we didn't have, and we live rural Alberta, but our closest town is Drayton Valley. We didn't have an issue signing up with a family doctor.
That's true. So a lot of these problems that Notley mentions throughout this debate, whether it's education, whether it's affordability, whether it's doctors or medical, I don't see the problems around here.
Yeah. So for those railroad ones, she gets in the chat, making let us know what it's like in Grand Prairie. But I just don't know. I've never encountered that issue. Both coming to Ontario as a new immigrant. So we were in Ontario for a good 15 years, maybe. And I changed family doctors maybe twice. Never had an issue. Didn't have an issue acquiring one personally when I moved. Didn't have an issue acquiring a pediatrician. Moving to Alberta, I did a quick Facebook search, like, hey, who would you recommend in Drayton Valley? We got a name. I called them. They're taking new patients. So I don't know if we're just fortunate in the areas we've moved to. I haven't lived in big cities to find out if there's an issue, if primarily that's where the issue is. But I don't get, I know it was a driving point throughout this debate, and it's understandable. You need a family doctor. If you got kids, of course, you want to make sure you got a family doctor. But I just haven't encountered that problem. So I don't know, for anyone in the chat yet, maybe share that.
Well, Scott, Mayor of Alexandria, is saying he doesn't have one yet.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have one yet?
In Alexandria. Well, that's Ontario, but that's weird.
And even then, when we moved to Alexandria, Scott, we got Dr. Salibi, no problem. My parents. So as a family of 6, so the 4 of us, and then my parents also moved to the same town, as you know, we got a family doctor right away. So I don't know. It's just not something I've encountered personally. But of course, it is an issue because we do want to make sure that we've got healthcare available to us and our family and our children.
And then Notley once again mentioned the capping, but she also talked about the spiraling costs. But she didn't relate the spiraling costs to the government, the federal government's policies. So I'm curious, if it was capped, if the utilities were capped during this inflationary cost increase that we just went through, what would happen to the quality of the product? Because they themselves would have had a cost increase, but being capped at the pricing. I think it would have absolutely destroyed the utility market over the last year during this inflation if there was caps in place. So what she's actually said here is, I'm going to put caps in place to reduce or control the cost that are spiraling out of control. But the drivers to the spiraling out of control are economic drivers on the federal level that you can't
on
ignore.
The federal level, and we've had our lovely Liberal government for way too long now.
Right. So that would have to mean that utilities would have to do cost reductions in order to keep the lights on, quite literally.
Yeah.
So her answer here about doing caps to to control cost makes no sense to me. It doesn't actually compute, because you just basically said, I'm going to lower the quality of your utilities, because that's the only outcome of that.
Something's got to give.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And what are we saying here, Prairie? I don't have one. Still waiting almost 2 years since a stroke. No doctor.
Wow.
That's Manitoba, Prairie. That's interesting that you're having those problems too. Could that be where you're at? Maybe there isn't one in that town. I don't know.
Yeah, we've just been clearly lucky.
Apparently, yeah, because even Scott is saying his wife has one for her and her kids in Richmond, Ontario, but they could not take me on. That's weird, dude. That's really weird. We're fortunate then, because yeah, I believe what Scott's saying. I believe what Perry's saying.
For sure.
Yep. But I wonder if NDP's policy of spending their way out of it with money they don't have is a solution.
Well, it's always a how. Where is this money going to come from? How are we going to do it? Of course, we all want doctors coming out the yin yang and practices everywhere. But
do we? No, we don't.
Well,
we don't want too many doctors, so you'll start getting the quality will go down.
Well, one of the adjustments we had to make from moving from the GTA to Eastern Ontario was the lack of walk-in clinics. Like where we lived in Mississauga and in Brampton, walk-in clinics everywhere. And when we moved to Eastern Ontario, that just wasn't a thing. It really wasn't. So there was a reduction in available or healthcare that you did need a family doctor. But in the cities, yeah, you couldn't move for walk-in clinics in that area.
And what Kevin's saying here is, why is the government so afraid of competition? Why can't we allow the consumer to choose if they want to use government insurance program to pay for their healthcare or pay for private insurance? Kevin, I'm 100% with you on this one. If we had a private system, a hybrid system, you get innovation, you get competition, the prices go down, you get more innovation on the private side, which trickles down to the public side. Across the board, you get more quality and less cost. And there Danielle is there, Kevin. So if you pay attention to what's coming up soon, that's exactly where she's headed with that. And then if we look at all the best countries for healthcare, they have two-tier. Yeah, I like that. Hybrid. We even have that for insurance across the country. Some provinces are private, some are public.
The UK has that too. They have the NHS and then they have private as well.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I think it's fine. I think especially when the private sector would be the one that would push innovation. So the price of drugs would go down, quality of drugs would go down, procedures, etc. And also, it's a good way to make sure that our highest quality and most talented doctors stay in Canada, because right now they leave to the States when they leave the private or public to go to private. So I'd like to keep them here. And then we have Peter or Clay. They don't want outside hands grabbing a slice of their pie. Clay, you're on this. You're on this. Then Scott, it's okay. I'm in prestige shape. Haha. That's right, Mayor. You're going to be around for a while. All right, let's keep going.
The first free debate on this issue tonight, starting with Ms. Smith.
And a UCP government will never, ever make you pay for a family doctor either. What we also won't do is cause an increase in your power bills. Ms. Notley is not taking responsibility for the fact that she created the power bill crisis. At the time, Alberta Party leader said it was the biggest mistake of the NDP government because of their ideological changes. By phasing out coal early, they added $2 billion to the cost of your power bill. And as a result, we're seeing the consequences of that today. And she's not stopped. She's going to achieve, she wants to achieve the 2035 net zero target put forward by Justin Trudeau. That'll cost $52 billion and increase your power bill another 40%. We can't afford to do that.
Well, you know, here's the thing. We actually put a cap in place, and we did that so that people's utilities and their electricity wouldn't get out of control. And it got out of control when the UCP removed the cap. But let's talk about something else, though. Let's talk about healthcare costs as they impact affordability. You claim that you won't raise costs, but Danielle, you know, I've known you for at least a decade, perhaps more, and I've watched your career, and you have argued passionately in multiple settings for your belief that you care about passionately, those were your words, making people pay more for their health care. So my question to you is, why are you not running on the thing that you believe? Why are you not being honest with Albertans? Why aren't you making the argument that you think having them pay more is what you want? Because you've said it in video, in papers, in speaking tours, in the legislature for...
Okay, so she's misrepresenting what Danielle is talking about, because Danielle's talking about a two-tier system where you can pay to go see your doctor if you want to. She's taking that soundbite and trying to apply it to the public system.
Yeah,
But that's not even what Danielle is suggesting. So it annoys me that she keeps harping on this one to either confuse voters or reinforce the confusion in her current base. But Danielle's isn't saying the public sector is going to require payment. It never will. It's public. It's when you want to go see a private doctor. And I think her comment was around the lines like, you should be able to pay $100 to go see your doctor if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And the public system shouldn't be covering those visits. That's where she was going with that. She was going towards, look, there's some people out there that really like to check in with their doctor and really want to go see them. And in the public system, that's a large cost because these are not unhealthy people. These are just people that want to have a little bit more attention with the doctor. So for people that want above and beyond the public, they can go ahead and pay for a doctor's visit in the private. And this is a good option for people so that the public system doesn't have to cover those costs. I have no problem with that. If you really want to spend a lot of time with your doctor, go for it. But why should the public have to pay for every visit if you're not actually sick or injured?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a time where people are going to say, well, it's not going to be for all situations, all scenarios. But I agree with that. I mean, for us, I really dislike going to the doctor just out of being exposed to other people who are sick. So we usually only go there when we just like.
Sure, but you do recognize that not all people are that way. There are some people that like us far more frequently.
Yeah.
And that's the cost that Danielle is targeting on that one. Let's call that the repeat for your own desire visits. They're not because they're sick. They're because they want to go see a doctor that day. And if you want to do that, that should be something you can pay for in the private system if the public system isn't covering that anymore.
Yeah, well, you have to wait.
Well, even then, like, you should have a purpose to go take a doctor's time.
Hey, look, I completely agree with you.
And that's what she's trying to do here. Like, look, if you're going because you're not injured and you're not sick, you just want to go have a checkup and you want to go, and it's not a yearly checkup, it's a regular checkup. Yes, I absolutely believe that should be covered by yourself if it's not an emergency or not necessary. I think this is where we're starting to get confused about what a public is meant for. It's meant to cover the necessities, not anything and everything. It never was designed because it never would be able to. There has to be limits in a public system. There has to be. How else would you be able to govern the costs?
Well, as long as there's continued population growth.
100%. And then we get into that later because she Notley complains about the education system, but doesn't cover why there's more students.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we'll get to that one.
Grainy videos of things I said while I was on radio. And the reason she does that is she doesn't want to run on her record. And the reason she doesn't want to run on her record is it was an absolute disaster. She racked up $70 billion in debt, more debt than any premier, actually all premiers combined in Alberta's provincial history. She talked about deception. Did you remember her running on a carbon tax in the last election? I sure didn't. And that increased the cost of everything. We eliminated it, but Justin Trudeau wouldn't let us keep it off. And now Ms. Notley has not stood up to her boss, Jagmeet Singh, in Ottawa, and worked with us to say don't increase that carbon tax any further. And in fact, certainly don't increase it 300%. No one has any credibility talking about affordability as long as they support a carbon tax, which is going to increase the cost of everything.
Ms. Smith, I'm sorry. You talk about grainy videos, but actually we had high definition 18 months ago when those videos of you arguing for people to pay for their health care came out. And you know what? We had high definition when you said you wanted to sell our hospitals across Calgary. And you know what? We had high definition a week ago when your deputy premier said that he thought people should.
Okay, so we're going to hear this a lot. Calgary from Notley. You're going to hear it a lot. She just said you sold a bunch of hospitals across Calgary. What Danielle actually did was a bunch of hospitals across Alberta. Notley forgets where she actually lives. She is stuck in Calgary. You're going to hear this a lot.
It did come up a lot.
It's a problem in Calgary because she can physically see it. Therefore, it must be a problem everywhere in Alberta. Therefore, it becomes a talking point. But Notley, you're living in a Liberal NDP stronghold, the city of Calgary. You are sitting with your comrades in the city that you're complaining about, and you're wondering how, and you're blaming the Conservative government for this problem that you're having. It's annoying how often she says Calgary instead of Alberta, and how often she attributes Calgary's problems to all of Alberta. And it's annoying because what she does talk about here, especially when it gets to education, isn't a rural issue. And
I at least, I would agree.
Yeah. The Calgary. Look, we love the Stampede. The Flames can have good years and all that kind of stuff. But Calgary is a Liberal stronghold, a
certainly is.
NDP stronghold. So if their backyard isn't great, they have only them to blame for that.
Yep.
Lot to get to tonight. We've got to move on.
And our next question comes from Courtney Ontario from City News. Courtney.
Thank you. This question is for NDP leader Rachel Notley. Now, no matter the provider or contract situation, utility costs remain high here in Alberta. Now, I know you both touched on previous policies, but my question is, what can government do to bring down the actual cost of utilities going forward?
Well, that's a very good question, and what we absolutely have to do is find a way to reduce those costs. A lot of Albertans aren't aware that in the pre-election period, the UCP put a cap on what folks are paying for their electricity just for the last 4 months. What they don't know is that, in fact, come June, they're going to have to pay that back, and that's going to cost about half of Alberta families about $200 million. So the first thing that we will do is we will actually have those families' backs, and we won't force them to pay back the cost of Danielle Smith's pre-election attempt at distracting people from what UCP policy has done to their utilities. But then going forward, we have to find a way.
Ouch. So hold on a second. So there's a deferred payment on the electricity. It's not a cap. So she used the wrong. It's a deferred payment to people that took advantage of it. And now what she just said was, for people who took advantage of the deferred payment, we're going to make taxpayers pay that bill. So she just said $200 million. She said it shouldn't be the people who had the deferred payment, which elected to do that. It should be everybody else. So your neighbor should pay your power bill, according to her.
But even then, she says, but we still have to come up with a way to reduce. So still didn't answer the question.
Correct. Like the question was, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? And she laid blame at UCP, highlighted an issue, quite honestly, fair enough, highlighted the deferred payments, but still didn't answer the question of what are you going to do regarding these.
I think she did, though. She said use taxpayer money to cover it.
And then, but then how the issue was to lower energy costs. And so she said, and then we'll just find a way to lower.
Right,
so
but she did say that. She did answer that. So she's going to lower the cost of electricity by getting taxpayers to subsidize it.
I took it that she's getting taxpayers to cover the current issue of the deferred payment, but the original question of how are you going to lower
but that
in
is
general,
the answer. So she said, I'm using taxpayer money to cover this problem. So you can then use that as her answer for all future cost-related problems for utilities. She'll use tax dollars. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So she increased the cost of electricity to begin with under her term, and then it got out of control with inflation, and now she's going to tax money her way out of that problem, and that's her answer.
Yeah.
So to anybody who's listening that has an understanding of how taxes work, you should be very afraid.
Okay.
For her base, who thinks money grows on trees or comes out of the ground in Alberta, then they're going to be in for a surprise, because who's covering that bill? It's everybody else who was paying their bills, being taxed into subsidizing their neighbors.
Yeah.
So that was her answer. I'm going to make your neighbors pay. And that will work for her base. But her base isn't big enough for this election if that's all she's going to be able to count on.
Rebuttal to you, Ms. Smith, 45 seconds.
Well, the first thing is that we have to build a power grid based on it being reliable and affordable as opposed to based on ideology. We have a federal government that is propped up by the NDP that has put war on natural gas. Our power grid here is almost 90% natural gas, and yet we have a federal government that wants us to be able to be completely abated on natural gas by 2035. That is the commitment that Ms. Notley has signed on to. She wants to achieve that. That's going to cost $52 billion and increase our power bills 40%. The other thing that's going to happen is they also want us to phase off completely in their new green building strategy, phase completely off natural gas, which one of the presidents of our large companies has said would cost another $75 billion. That is not the way to get affordable energy for Albertans.
Okay, Ms. Notley, you now have the floor for your rebuttal.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let me just say, first of all, that the numbers that Ms. Smith are throwing around are numbers that have been fully discredited. And they've actually been discredited by the people that the UCP hired to come up with the numbers. Almost the day after they came up with those numbers, the firm came out and said, nope, those weren't right. And in fact, the other report that they were relying on was also deeply flawed. What we know is that there is roughly $16 trillion of international investment floating around out there looking to invest in renewable energy. And
this is my favorite line. When I heard her say it the first time, it reminded me of Dragon's Den. When people say, there's $16 trillion worth out there, and if we just got 1% of it, all our problems would be solved. I'm like, my goodness, you can't just say, okay, look, we're here, come and invest. You've got to do something about it. You've got to make yourself appealing for investment to come.
Oh, yes, and that reminds me of what she uses investment, the term as. She uses it as free money.
Yeah.
So she's saying, hey, there's $16 trillion of free money hanging around out the globe. We should try to grab it. Investment simply means that somebody is expecting a return on this. So you want to attract outside money out of Canada into Canada with the expectation that they're going to receive a return on that money and it's going to leave Canada. So let's just say you got yourself 1% of that 16 trillion, which would be what, 160 billion?
You could do the math.
Yeah. And then they put this 160 billion in. They were what, 200 billion, 300 billion out. This is what investment means. Investment isn't free money. And when you hear out of the NDP, they say, there's this money floating around and we can't attract it.
If we just get a little bit, it was just complete Dragon's Den.
Whereas the UPC has similar talking points, but for growing the business, helping the business economy grow, which will then help hire more people and the economy in general will grow. It's not about trying to free money. And it really bothers me that this is their thinking. And when she talks like this, you must understand she knows people in Davos, because this is who she's speaking of. It's that the cartel of funding that's global, and that's what she's pointing to. There's a $16 trillion global fund for green energy, which is supported by the global of WEF. So she's pointing to that as a place that Alberta should be looking for investment from. Insane in the membrane. This is crazy talk, because not only do you tie yourselves into the globalist agenda, financially speaking, as bringing them in as investors, but guess who gets to drive a lot of the decision making and the progress and the guidance of whatever it is you're working on? Your stakeholders, which include your investors. So she's literally telling Alberta, hey guys, let's get the globalists more involved in our economy. Let's tie ourselves to them and then become beholden to them, because they are expecting a return over time.
Exactly. That's what an investor requires from their investment.
So this is insane. But she, and what I'd like to hear more from Danielle as well, is about spurring on investment locally. Bring investment across Canada to Alberta and have Albertans invest in Alberta, because that's where we want the money to stay. We don't want it to cross our border to international investors as a return on investment. We want all of that capital growth to stay within Alberta. So you hear her talk like that. The only people that we triggered in a positive way on that kind of talking point are people who have no idea where this money comes from, what strings are attached with it, and what our future is going to be if we're beholden to these groups at this kind of level. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. I think let's say talking to those who aren't investment savvy, just say, but there's trillions out there. If we just got a bit of it into here, like all our problems would be solved. That type of level of, yes, our leader's going to make that happen. No problem. We're going to not just get said, we'll probably get the whole thing because Alberta's great and we could. No, this doesn't work that way.
And these are the same people that will rack up the insurance costs on credit, or interest costs on credit, and then complain that they can't afford things.
Yep.
And you're wondering
It's
why.
not their fault.
Yeah, so this is why the neighbors have to cover the subsidy payments, and this is why your neighbors have to cover your electricity payments, because you're not handling your money.
Not everyone, to be fair.
No,
yeah.
I'm isolating the people that think credit and investment money is free money. Whenever you think that way, this is free money. This is the problem you get yourself
for those
into.
who have that attitude of,
Correct, and that's certainly not everybody. That
No.
is a particular segment of society, and Notley subscribes to that because she keeps talking about it like it is. It's just in the air, and all we have to do is grab a handful of it, and we get to do great things with it. No, there's a return. You're going to have to.
There's an expected return. Otherwise, investment will be withdrawn.
Well, not so much just withdrawn. It's just they will force sales of things. They will get leaders out. They'll get the CEO out. Like shareholders have a lot of power. The investors have a lot of power. So, and that's my major concern, is having a global consortium of financially powerful people also having influence into our energy. This is what she's literally saying. She's going to bring into you. She's going to bring the global into our energy industry sector. You really think it's going to lower costs? Or should we have internal innovation and work on it internally, invest internally, keep the money local? If there's going to be returns, it's paid to Albertans, paid into the system, paid back any of the debt will be generated
set
local.
that up with the infrastructure investment deal to ensure that the area that you are investing in also rewards and the fruits of it. Yeah.
Right. So so if things go well with the investment, the energy grid builds up, and there's some good returns, it's going to be shipped out.
Yeah.
It's going to be shipped out of the province. Insane in the membrane.
Position our economy for the future, we need to go out there and get that investment. We can't look
I hate that line.
We have to plan forward. That's who Albertans are. Now, when we did the phase out of coal, we increased renewable energy in Alberta so successfully when we were in government, we controlled utility costs for the sole purpose of making sure consumers didn't pay the cost, and that's exactly what we would do again.
All right,
That's
Ms. Smith,
insane. I don't know what that means.
much of that.
Too much government interference.
Well, I know Ms. Notley says she believes in science and she believes in experts, but somehow the expert that the Alberta electric system operator she wants to discredit. But you notice that she didn't disavow the 2035 target for net zero, even though the Saskatchewan NDP did. Saskatchewan NDP voted with Premier Scott Moe saying it is unachievable. If we want to have a realistic plan, a practical plan, we have to fight back against Ottawa. This candidate will not. We have to fight back against Ottawa and make sure that we put a target that's reasonable, realistic, and achievable, and that's carbon neutrality by 2050. That's the policy of our party, and that is the way that we're going to make sure that we maintain reliability, affordability, and that we actually achieve our targets.
We'll get you back in here, Ms. Notley.
Just going to point out that Notley has the Chrystia Freeland bobblehead. This goes back and forth, back and forth.
You're keen on fighting. You want to fight with Ottawa. You want to fight with the media. You want to fight, frankly, with your former self. It's actually quite exhausting. Here's what I need Albertans to know.
Okay, Alberta, did you just hear what she said? Don't fight. It's too much trouble.
Yeah.
Every single thing she just said there is exactly what Albertans should be doing, including reflecting his position changed over time for whatever reason, including economic drivers. You should be able to. Did she just accuse her opponent of being able to reflect and change your mind as a derogatory thing? In other terms, every single thing that Notley has ever believed in their entire history
set in stone and will continue to the end of time.
Right. And if you don't, that's a negative trait.
Yeah.
That should be a red flag to everybody, that she doesn't have the ability to reflect and take in more information and make better judgments, which a good leader would do. If you zig one day, but because of new information, because of progress, because of innovation, because of a lot of different drivers, you then need to zag You want your leader to be able to do that. This lady just told you, I am so rigid and so brittle that I'm not flexible enough to even change my opinion on stuff.
Yeah.
Good luck with that as a leader, especially as our times are so dynamic and changing so quickly now. You need somebody to be able to roll with the punches and revisit your own decisions. I think that each time she does this as a derogatory term to Danielle, the way I'm taking it is it's a positive. I'm more attracted to Danielle because she was able to reflect and change her mind on something. It's not a negative.
Yeah, I'm for that as well. There is always a concern about a politician just flip-flopping and going wherever constituents want or whatever's going to get them that popularity vote and that leadership vote. There is that issue, but there's also the whole, but yes, times change, and sometimes just flat out, you have to change your views on something because the evidence has been provided, or just sometimes your constituents are saying, actually, no, we do not want this, and we don't want you to represent us if you're for it. And I'll be like, well, it's not. And she's Danielle comes up with a comment later, which would be very much of you. It's the constituents. You represent the constituents. And it's a case of, if this is what they want, that's what you, as their representative, needs to bring to the table.
Right. 100%. And if you're not listening to the constituents, who are you listening to?
Exactly. So I'll highlight it when it comes up. But when she spoke, I immediately thought of things that you have said of what you want to represent for Yellowhead.
Cool. Thanks for that plug.
Alberta. I will always stand up for the interests of Albertans. I did that when I was Premier. I made sure we got a pipeline to Tidewater, the first one in 50 years. I did that standing up against the BC government. I did it standing up with a federal government, and that's my record, and that will also be my blueprint. So, Ms. Smith, I just have to say I disagree with so much of what you.
Just so everybody knows, she forgot what to say there. So she simply just pulled out the good old faithful, I disagree with everything.
Yeah.
She couldn't even isolate and be specific about what she disagreed with and why. She just simply said, I don't like what you say.
Overall, Danielle is the better public speaker than Rachel Notley.
Yeah. And you'll see coming up, she is a little immature. And even though she was Premier for a while, you would expect this to be more polished, but nope. And absolutely, Ellen, lots of people think everything is free. We know who they are. They never grew up. They never left the immature stage where everything was provided to them. And our mayor knows that for sure. Nothing's free. And Clay is 100% behind Ellen on this one. And Scott, we will be paying for air soon. Scott, you can buy bottled air. It's big in China.
They need it.
Justin Trudeau canceled Northern Gateway. She didn't stand up when Energy East pulled the plug. She didn't stand up when they brought in a tanker ban off the West Coast for our product, and she didn't stand up when the No More Pipelines bill was passed.
Well,
she will not stand up.
In fact, you know that's not true. You commented on
there's
the
an
fact
example
that
of
I made
unable to
submissions
control
to the
itself.
Senate. You know that's what I did on both of those issues.
It was too late. And I must tell you, where do you think Justin Trudeau got the idea for just transition and for an emissions cap and for a carbon tax? He got it from Ms. Notley when she was Premier, and she's going to continue to implement these same kind of policies, and she's going to walk in lockstep with Justin Trudeau on making sure that they get implemented, and that's only going to help our economy.
Get Trudeau.
That is all the time we have for this topic, and in fact for this portion of the debates.
And when we come back, we will be talking more about healthcare and the economy. Please stay with us.
Well, there's the first segment. There we go. Everybody, let's make sure that you do some comments and you do all of that and give us some chats. It all helps with the algorithm. We're working really hard to get the word out. So anything you can do with the comments and chats would be great. Make sure you subscribe now as well. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and push that subscribe for us, and the bell if you want to be notified immediately when new videos are up. They are coming up daily, and we also have replays coming up daily as well now. So thank you for that. Well, that was a good first segment. We definitely have to keep this moving along quicker, though, because we're going to run out of time if we don't. So let me go ahead and get segment 2 ready for us. Segment 2.
riveting stuff.
It's not bad so far, right? Yeah, not bad so far. We're just getting started. But you can see the demeanor between the two is very different.
Yeah. And it would be a wish list, I think, for every resident watching politicians speak. We know your opponent has got some history. They've made some bad decisions. But it's like, can we just, I don't care. I want to know what you are bringing to the table and how you plan to bring it. That's truly all I want to know. I don't care really what, I know Danielle Smith's got a history again before our time in Alberta. I just want to know what's happening today. What are you going to do for tomorrow? Just please tell me.
Well, I'm impressed because she crossed the floor, which is one of the most difficult things to do for your political career. That's quite the gamble.
No kidding, I know.
But I'm impressed by that because what it meant was she can revisit her thinking. She is not so stubborn that she can't even re-examine her political position.
Because they know how big it is to do that.
Sure.
And for any politician, they know what it's like when you go to the other team. You know that's always going to be sound bites brought up. That's going to be references anytime that you're spoken about. So it's not a decision that's made lightly, and they don't do it thinking, oh, well, no one's going to remember. No, they will. Every time you're on the news, they're going to bring it up.
Yeah, as part of your history now forever for both sides.
Yeah.
They can use that soundbite. So that takes quite the leader, in my opinion, to be able to take that step. I think is a very brave thing to do. It's kind of like admitting, I've been wrong all this time.
Yeah, kind of. But there is no going. I don't think there could be forgiveness or tolerance if you were to ever flip back. I'm like, no. And that to me, I would lose respect for that politician if that ever happens. Like, the likelihood is very slim, so that's why they know if we're making that decision to go, it's make or break. You got.
And it's better late than never. If she's going to make the move out, better late than never.
For sure.
So I don't find that as a negative.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Welcome back to the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. UCP Leader Danielle Smith and NDP Leader Rachel Notley are here answering questions that matter to you.
The state of health care is one of the most pressing issues in our province, highlighted by overrun hospitals over the winter months and the struggle for many Albertans to find a family doctor.
That topic is front and center in this segment of the debate, beginning with a question from CBC's Judy Aldis.
Thank you and good evening. Fixing healthcare isn't just about spending more money, it's about designing a more responsive and effective system. So, beyond dollars spent, what are your creative and transformative approaches to restoring confidence in the system for Albertans? And Ms. Smith, we'll let you have the first crack at that question.
When I first got elected, I was being told that the AHS system was on the brink of collapse. You had unions saying that we needed to go back to mandates and start masking kids in school. And I said, absolutely not. We are not going back to that. If the problem is AHS, then let's fix AHS. So we talked to doctors and nurses and paramedics on the front line. We listened to them and we implemented their ideas. And guess what? It's working. Hospital wait times are down. EMS response times are down. We've effectively ended red alerts for EMS in both of our major cities. Ambulances in rural are staying in rural, and we're reducing surgical wait times. We're going to be able to keep this going. And if we continue at this rate, we will have completely eliminated our surgical backlog by this time next year and be the first province in the country to do so.
And your rebuttal now, Ms. Notley.
Well, I will say Albertans have had enough of driving hundreds of kilometers to get the emergency care, obstetric care, cardiac care, any kind of care that they need. They're tired of looking for doctors. They're tired of 15-hour waits in the emergencies rooms. And they're particularly tired of having the UC.
Just want to highlight all justifications for a private hybrid system she just gave there. Those are all good reasons for a private hybrid system. 100%. Because if you have more people going to private, there's less people in the public, wait times are lower, et cetera, et cetera.
Here's the thing, obstetrics, having babies. I find it very disappointing that is an issue, at least in our community. We have a hospital in Drayton Valley. For us specifically, we were at about 25 minutes away. Can't have a baby there. So instead, you could either drive an hour to two of the nearest towns in order to go and deliver a baby.
Well, that's not due to the hospital. That's due to staff. We don't have anesthesiologists.
This is so. Again, whether it's the NDP or the UCP, providing good hospital care is key, whomever is at the helm, quite honestly. And discovering that that was an issue in this community, it is an issue that needs to be dealt with. One of my big things
Okay, but I'm going to cut in on that one. That one has been addressed by the mayor of Drayton. She's trying to attract an anesthesiologist here. They don't have one. That's why they had to close down that part of the hospital. And
keep trying, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, the problem is all of our people are leaving. They're moving to the States for better employment. So this is why we're not attracting very well right now. You're not wrong. I think the issue isn't so much costs and stuff. It's attracting good people to the system.
Yeah, and they touch upon that about having applications open and still not filling them.
Yeah. They've been looking for quite some time. That's why
that is an issue. Moving past the next step of having a family doctor, having medical services available to communities, and the fact that there is a fully fledged hospital 30 minutes away from us, and for I guess 5 minutes from whoever who lives in the town, and there are certain medical issues, everyday medical issues, that cannot be addressed there.
So I think you bring up a good point. Neither one of these candidates talk about how to attract more doctors and how to educate more doctors.
No, and like I said, it doesn't. And I think this is an issue, no matter what province you're in, no matter what country you're in. It is getting good quality services available to you, as in having a hospital, and then having them 24/7 for a community. It's just it is a necessity, and it's an ongoing problem that whomever is leading has to deal with.
Good point. Neither one of them talks about the brain drain of our medical system.
Yeah.
A problem. We've put forward a reasonable, practical solution. The answer is to get more Albertans access to a family doctor. By doing that with our costed plan.
Yeah, let's attack.
The family doctor, yes, is the first level of medical care for a family, but a family doctor isn't going through emergency rooms, obstetrics, surgeries. That's not your family doctor. Us sticking on the sticking point of not paying for a family doctor, I get it, it's important, but that's not just
it's not your only touch point.
That should not be. It should be what's everything else after that. And that was one thing that bugged me, that especially for her, that was just the only thing she hopped on, paying for a family doctor. No, there's way more healthcare services people require, not just that. And that's why I wanted to hear from her
wait times off of our ambulances. And we can also make sure that nobody ever has to pay to see a family doctor.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Notley. Once again, let's dive back into the free debate portion where you're free to challenge each other's policies, beginning with Ms. Smith.
You know, I heard of all of the things that Ms. Notley mentioned when I was in politics last time in 2012, and she had 4 years to fix it, and she didn't. She didn't listen to the front line. All she did was continue to build the bureaucracy, and she didn't get to local decision making. She didn't get to local control. We did. We heard from paramedics what they wanted us to do, and it was actually very straightforward. We had to make sure that they had the ability to drop patients off when they arrived on the site so that they can get back out and be there for you when you needed them. And that was a very straightforward idea that came from the front lines. And Ms. Notley had an opportunity to fix healthcare. She didn't. We're beginning on this pathway. We're making great progress, and we need to have another mandate to continue it.
Ms. Notley will get you in on this.
Yes, no. Well, quite honestly, as I said before, Albertans are so frustrated when they're told that there isn't a problem and everything has been fixed. The reality is things have gotten considerably worse over the last 4 years. The UCP cut funding dramatically. They ripped up the deal with the doctors. They told nurses that they needed to be laid off. They threatened to lay off 10,000 frontline healthcare workers, and then and then COVID hit. So, and the result, unfortunately, is we've got whole cities without access to family doctors.
Cities.
We've
Not even
got
Alberta again.
just last week we had 15-hour waits in emergency rooms all across Calgary.
Not Alberta.
And we recently, just this year, half as many doctors are accepting new patients. So there is a problem. It's very real. And selling our hospitals and forcing people to pay for private care is not the solution.
Nobody's forced to
You
pay
want
for
back
private
in?
care.
Go ahead.
Choice.
Look, for a
Look,
second.
we signed a
This
deal
is a
with the
side
We
note.
do have to start getting through it faster, though.
Yeah, just as a side note, it is a big thing that there's 15-hour wait lists in hospitals in Calgary. But you know what? It would even help her case if she says in Calgary, in Edmonton, or across Alberta. When she only highlights one city, you get the eye roll from me saying, you know what, but you kind of shut the door on yourself because you could have most likely says there's long wait lists across the province.
Yeah, but the thing maybe isn't. Maybe she's 100% correct. Maybe it's only a Calgary issue, because that's what I got to focus on, is what she's saying.
That's right. If you're not highlighting other areas of the province, then is it just one area? And then it could be more of a, maybe, the powers that be in Calgary need to reassess.
Well, we know who runs
Calgary.
Calgary. Yeah. It's her comrades. So she's really complaining about her own comrades' accomplishments there.
Yeah.
Negotiated that we're going to have 25% of our doctors on an alternative payment system within the next 5 years. And that allows for team practice. It allows for nurse practitioners and LPNs, psychologists and other health practitioners to work together in a team practice so that more access will be given on primary care. We put $2 billion towards this, and we're making great progress. We have more health professionals today than we did when Ms. Notley left office, 8,500 more, in fact, including 700 more doctors. And in April, our plan to recognize credentials is working. We had 1,400 nurses who are now licensed and able to practice in Alberta, more than any time in the previous 3 years. The system is working. We've got much more work to do. We know that, but we've got to continue on the work that we have, because I've got the courage. I've got the courage to talk to the front line, and I've got the courage to be able to implement some of the suggestions that they make. Ms. Notley has demonstrated.
All right, we're just going to leave it at that question.
And Kevin here, Governor Corrupt, made a good point. Here is a challenge, Jason. Type into Google Canadian healthcare crisis, then choose any year. What I believe Kevin's getting at is this is always a problem. This is always a talking point. This is like the fight on poverty. It can never go away. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how quick the hospital gets you through. There will be complaints about anything and everything. If it got to the point where you were in and out of the hospital in an hour, they would complain that you're not there enough, that you're not spending enough time with a doctor, that they're not really checking you over because they're too quick. They're treating you like fast food. So there will be no way to ever get to the point where every single person in this country says yay to healthcare. So this is why it becomes a perpetual issue that they're always going to talk about. And as Canadians, it's become part of our programming to always complain about healthcare. I encourage Canadians, if you haven't done it yet, leave the country for a bit and go to another country that doesn't have these kind of systems in place. Go talk to the people there and go check out their health. You'll come back pleased that we have what we have in place. Sure, there's room for improvement, but that's just like everything else. There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kevin, for bringing that up. That's always an issue. It's always a talking point.
It is. Province-wide, countrywide, global. It is.
And Ellen, sheesh, Calgary. Doesn't anybody care about Toronto anymore? You're absolutely right. Thank you, Ellen, for that. That was a nice one. But yeah, you're going to hear Calgary so much. So maybe we'll give Notley the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she's 100% correct. Calgary is a very difficult place to live right now. Not the rest of Alberta, according to Notley.
Yeah.
And that's her backyard. She's a rep there. She was elected there, and this is where she lives. So if her own backyard isn't a place that you want to live, don't let her take over all of Alberta.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Question, because we have another one on health right now.
You bet. Our next question is from Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
There is already a lot of private delivery in our public healthcare system, which has existed under the NDP and UCP governments. What criteria would you apply to determine when expanded private delivery is appropriate? And we'll go to Ms. Notley first, please.
Well, honestly, I mean, at this point, what we would always look at is to get the best care for the greatest number of people in the most efficient and cost-effective way. Now, as you may know, there was a study that came out today, just today, on the success of the Alberta government's surgical care initiative. And what they concluded was that the number of surgeries went down and the cost went up. Now, that's not entirely surprising, because most often when you engage in experimentation with privatization, that's what happens. It's the same thing that's going on with the lab situation in Calgary right now. With the UCP's intention to increase private lab services, we now see Calgarians waiting up to a month to get a simple blood test. It doesn't work. We need to focus on
she could be the premier of Calgary there.
All right, Ms. Notley, that is your 45 seconds. Ms. Smith, over to you.
We need to have publicly funded health care for both doctors and doctor-run surgical centres. We have 300,000 surgeries being done per year. 60,000 of them are in doctor-run surgical centres that Ms. Notley apparently wants to shut down. She hasn't answered the question about how we would be able to replace those surgeries. And I can tell you what is actually happening, because a lot has changed since November when we started making these changes in health care. What has happened, in fact, is that we identified that there were 39,000 people waiting longer than medically recommended. We've been cutting that list down by 3,000 surgeries per month. We're now down to 30,000 people waiting. And as I said, if we continue at this pace, those waits will be completely over by this time next year.
That's a good answer, because she's giving numbers and she's giving specifics, and she knows her numbers too, which is good.
Exactly. She's providing the how to how we're going to get this done.
The tangible answer, as opposed to the fantasy one. Because Rachel listed off 3 would be fantastic if you can get it. Everybody gets great care for cheap. We have a saying in tech, you can have it quick, you can have it good, and you can have it cheap. Pick 2, because you can't get all 3. It's impossible. And she's just said that. She just said basically everything with no explanation on how.
Now, the benefit is that Danielle Smith is actually being practical, because she's behind the wheel. She's actually being able to say that this is what we're implementing, this is the results.
But here's the thing, Notley was behind the wheel too. She should be able to have those talking points.
Fair enough, because any opponent, they can only do a what if, this is what we plan to do.
Right.
So fair enough, she's at a slight disadvantage. But again, then you need to still explain, how do you plan to do this, not what you're going to do. Of course, we all know what you should be doing. How are you going to?
Right. And we got a little entertainment break here from Prairie. So let's try and sing along with this.
Oh, good God, not with my voice.
It is a song that never ends. It goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing forever just because. LOL. There you go. It's a song that never ends. Thanks, Prairie. And I know Ellen enjoyed it. She loved it. And Clay loved it as well. And look at this, Prairie's getting some love back. Do you want to try it there, young lady? You got your voice?
No.
It's a song that never ends. All right. I'm not just a candidate. I'm an entertainer.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, I think that we need to understand that there is a very, very serious problem, and we are not a year away from fixing all these.
No. You can't say that. She's not in a position to even qualify that statement. And when Danielle says, look, we're doing so many a month and we need 12 more months to do it, that is qualified.
Yeah.
So you can't really just say, don't like that. It's not true. You need to add it with some sort of evidence. So what do you mean?
Yeah, it's a plan that's being enacted, and it's going ahead. If it can be improved upon as time goes on, no one's going to
Well, maybe
do it.
what she has in her mind is she knows that if she goes in, she'll cancel that particular program, which is allowing doctors to do 30,000 surgeries a month. 3,000 a month, right? We're trying to catch up on 30,000. So 3 extra a month.
Yeah.
She wants to kill that program. That would be how her statement becomes truthful in the future. I hope Calgarians are paying attention to this election.
And a flu wave, and she's now comparing statistics to that period of time. It's a seasonal change that she's trying to convince is turning into a long-term trend, but it's not real. What is real is that this.
Okay, that was misinformation. So what Danielle was talking about was a backlog of surgeries that happened during the COVID lockdowns, and then catching up on those 30,000. We need 10 more months at 3,000 a month. So what Notley's speaking about here is completely disinformation. She is intentionally trying to mislead people, trying to mislead people on what the numbers truly are.
or this spring, BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba filled all of their residency spots for family doctors. Alberta, for the first time, had 45 vacancies. And then they...
Well, I think that's good news. Only 45 vacancies and then we're perfect, according to Notley.
Yeah.
So if we went on a hiring campaign, dragged 50 doctors from around the world to come to Alberta, we're done?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Exactly.
Well done. That's not bad.
Still vacancies, and we don't have family doctors coming to work here in Alberta, and the reason is because Ms. Smith is doing things like referring to them as tyrants and suggesting that
No, she
people who
didn't.
follow public health orders are Nazi sympathizers, and these things
free to
undermine the ability
Dirty,
to attract
dirty,
frontline
dirty.
healthcare professionals. They don't.
To my Ontarians, that is a misquote completely. If you want to look into it, Danielle never said that, but she did refer to people that just follow blindly into what people say without using their own brains. Isn't wise, and that is something back in World War II. And she was more talking about how people should be more wise to what's being said to them and not necessarily follow it. So gross that she goes and brings up that term during this, and I love Danielle's response to it.
And they don't feel that this government is at all focused on science and having their back.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Our doctors, nurses, paramedics, and other health professionals are the heroes of our healthcare system. Everybody knows that. What I find so interesting is that Ms. Notley isn't running at all on her record from when she was premier, because she would have to admit that surgical wait times actually went up for 9 key surgeries. She'd have to admit that she didn't actually have the courage to take on the challenge of reforming healthcare. We're already making progress. Of course, there's much more to do, but I am confident that with a new mandate, we'll be able to continue making this progress. The next step, of course, is building out our primary care system, building out continuing care, and adding more home care so that people can age in place, and making sure that we've got that team practice so that anybody has access to healthcare when they need it.
Ms. Notley, care to respond?
Yes, well, I mean, I think the fundamental problem here is that Albertans are deeply concerned at the notion of a Danielle Smith-led government reforming healthcare in any way, shape, or form.
No, we're not.
She claims
No,
she's
it needs reforming.
guaranteed that nobody will ever pay for a doctor. But, you know, Ms. Smith, I was with you in the legislature in 2014. You stood up and you guaranteed you would never cross the floor. 3 weeks later, you crossed the floor. Your understanding of the
Danielle.
word guarantee is very different than that of most Albertans. And most people are deeply, deeply troubled at the prospect of you reforming healthcare based on your 15-year record of advocating to make people pay
about
out
the
of
current
pocket.
state
Okay,
of
we
health,
are
we're
there
gonna be
out of
forming
time
it.
for this
This is a
one
talking
issue,
point.
but we're going to move on. And economy, definitely something that many Albertans are concerned about as we head forward, given the historic reliance on the oil and gas sector for jobs and government revenue, the world beginning to shift away from petroleum products.
Economy and jobs are the key issue in this portion of the debate. With the first question, here is Courtney Terrio from City News.
Now, both of you have made many promises in this election, committing to billions in new spending. With the price of oil sitting below budget projections at various times this year, and given that volatility, how will you pay for these commitments and stay on budget without steep cuts? That first question going to Ms. Smith.
Well, I must say, I know Aaron in the intro talked about shifting away from petroleum products, and I would say that is the Notley view of the world. That is certainly not my government's view of the world. We believe that we are going to reduce emissions, not that we are going to reduce oil and natural gas. We know that with all of the exciting things that are happening with carbon capture, utilization and storage and all the green technology, we can continue to have a robust, vibrant oil and natural gas sector for years to come. What we want to do is make sure that we're finding more opportunities for our products, having bitumen be used more for asphalt so it reduces the amount of emissions, having LNG export, which creates a brand new stream of income for us. We know that as long as we keep our energy industry strong, we're going to keep Alberta's economy strong. Ms. Notley won't do that. I will.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Ms. Notley, your rebuttal.
I agree with that completely.
Well, you know, there was actually some elements of what Ms. Smith said that I actually agree with. You know, I want to create jobs producing energy. I want to create jobs upgrading our energy, and I want to create jobs reducing emissions. And reducing emissions is absolutely the focus.
Nothing
it's
wrong
not
with
about
what she said.
reducing
No,
or
no,
until
production.
she goes
It
to
is
cap
about
that
emissions.
industry.
The difference is that Ms. Smith and her caucus have spent much of their career pitting emissions reduction efforts against economic growth. And when we do that, we fail on both. What we want to do is understand the economic opportunity that comes from investing in emissions reductions, attracting investment from other parts of the world, and growing jobs while ensuring greater markets for our oil and gas.
All right, thank you, Ms. Notley. Let's go back to our free
But
debate
no
format
specifics.
right now.
Again,
The
with the
second element,
investment
That's
from
Rachel,
global
how.
with you.
sources.
Ms.
Where's the
Notley
how?
has so many anti-oil and gas candidates, I have lost count, including one who compared it to slavery. And I know he hasn't apologized yet, nor have you, or condemned his comments. What I would say is that when you take a position of increasing business taxes, you're creating a lot of uncertainty in our sector. We took the 12% tax that Ms. Notley had imposed, brought it down to 8%, and look what happened. Year over year, we ended up diversifying our economy, attracting more investment, creating more jobs. More people are coming into this province than ever before, and what a bonus. We now have more corporate income revenue than we have in our history, $6.4 billion. When you reduce taxes, you end up attracting jobs and investment and people. When you increase taxes, you chase it away. She wants to increase taxes again. We can't let her do that.
Ms. Notley.
Well, 2 points there. First of all, I find it deeply ironic that Ms. Smith is talking about uncertainty and its impact on attracting investment. This is a person who, well, started by bringing in the Sovereignty Act, an act that her former finance minister very clearly said was going to chase away investment because it undermined the rule of law. That, of course, was before she was found today to have broken the law in an
For my Ontarians out there, the Sovereignty Act was just notice to the federal government that we're going to stick to Section 92 of the Constitution.
That's
There's
right.
absolutely nothing in there that doesn't already exist with the power of the province or the people. So for her to continue with that particular talking point that we're trying to ignore the federal law or anything like that, if you read the Sovereignty Act, we would ignore any unjust laws that they don't have the power for, or anything that they're pushing in that they don't have the right to do. We should be doing that as people as well. And I know Kevin and a whole bunch of other people that are around in this chat would agree completely. What she is trying to say is we're not kowtowing enough
Look,
to the federal government.
I was for it. I'm in a complete agreement, and I just find it ironic that Danielle just says that we've brought in like $6 billion worth of corporate investment, and then this one is saying, yeah, but because of the Sovereignty Act that you're trying to push, we're going to lose investment. No,
But we just got some.
Exactly.
We just got
So
a
it's
lot
just-
more increased since the Sovereignty Act was announced. And I believe businesses, because I'm a business person as well, wants this ability on a provincial level that can't be pushed around on a federal.
federally. Yeah, that's right.
So that's absolutely. And I think Ontario will lose a lot of investment to Alberta because of this.
to support the private interests of someone accused of wanting to promote violence against the police. All of that.
That didn't happen. If you actually listen to the speech from the pastor, and what Danielle did was she looked to see if she can help.
But also, let me talk
then
for
she
just
asked
a moment
for help
about
and
the
was told
issue
no.
of corporate
End of
taxes.
story.
Here's what we're going to do. We are going to take the lowest corporate taxes in the country and move them to be the lowest.
Only dumb people will listen to that sentence and understand that what she just said is she's raising taxes.
Yeah.
And she's not even, well, she's being very coy about it by saying, we have the lowest and we will still have the lowest after I raise it. Welcome, Alberta. This is insane.
Lower than Doug Ford's. And at the same time, we will have the income necessary to rebuild our education, rebuild our post-secondary, and invest appropriately in a stable system of healthcare. And all of that creates and attracts investment.
Back to Ms. Smith.
Ms. Notley, it's you and the CBC who need to apologize for Albertans. You flat out lied for several months saying that I and my office had contact Crown prosecutors. She said that is absolutely not true. And she also confirmed that I did not direct or interfere in any COVID-related cases. I would say that we have increased the amount of investment that has happened in our province. We have a $760 million renewable diesel project announced by Imperial. We have $600 million that came in from McCain's. Our Pathways Oil Sands Group is investing. We have an increase in the amount of drilling rigs. That is not a sign that people have lost confidence in our economy. You know what it is a sign of? That when you stand up to Ottawa and you tell the industry that you're going to stand up for them, they actually increase their amount of have confidence and they increase their investment.
Except we have fewer corporate headquarters in Calgary, in Alberta now than we did before in 2019, before you announced your incredibly spendthrift corporate handout.
All right, that's going to do it for this question. We have
Actually, that was unfair. That's more COVID and that's more remote worker. The fact that we have less headquarters.
2019.
There's a whole bunch of factors. But the increase in the taxes from corporations to $6.4 billion is the number you should be looking at. So that did go up. So we did get more money in from businesses.
You have it right now.
And that's coming from Judy Aldis of CBC.
Thank you. You've both
It should be a fair and
mentioned
balanced
the desire to reduce emissions. Both of your parties have signaled the desire, in fact, to move towards a net zero future. So, Ms. Notley, we'll start with you. Can you outline for us specific actions that you will take to make sure that that happens?
Well, that's a very good question. So let me first point out, in contrast to what Ms. Smith had said previously, is that I was actually the first political leader in Alberta over a year ago to speak out on behalf of Albertans and point out that the draft emissions targets coming from the federal government were unrealistic. I do, however, believe that we need to come up with a Made in Alberta plan that includes practical, achievable emissions limits, and then we need to find and incent the investment. We have to compete with the U.S. and the Inflation Reduction Act to get that investment, but there's a lot out there, and we have some of that set out in our platform, but there's more to do.
Okay, Ms. Smith,
you can't speak about it now,
Actually,
though.
what
Just
Ms.
look at your
Notley
platform.
has said is that she believes we need an emissions cap, and it needs to be very close to what the federal government is proposing. The federal government is proposing a 42% emissions cap reduction by 2030, which we know is a de facto production cap. And if we have a production cap, it means that we're going to reduce the overall amount of revenues. She has also confirmed, and not denied it this evening, that she agrees with the federal proposal for a net zero power grid by 2035, which we know will cost $52 billion and increase your electricity bills by 40%. We have seen this newsreel before. It's why she doesn't want to talk about her record. When she came in, increased the corporate tax, brought through a surprise carbon tax, increased personal income taxes, 183,000 jobs were lost in the first couple of years.
Well, let me just say, first of all, when we talk about my record in oil and gas, I think it's kind of hard to forget the big thing, which is the first pipeline to Tidewater in 50 years. That's my...
I want to highlight that there's no oil through that pipeline.
Oh.
So I don't believe so. I believe it hasn't been completed and they're not pumping yet. So she's pointing to a project that she's proud of that hasn't completed even yet. It's odd.
So that's the first thing. Secondly, your numbers around job losses. I think we need to kind of talk a little bit about that, Danielle. Many experts have reviewed that, and they've said they're absolutely ridiculous. In fact, at the end of our term, we had, after a very difficult recession, we came out about 45,000 jobs ahead. And if we were to use your means of coming up with that 180,000 number, the number of jobs lost under the UCP would be over 250,000. So I think Albertans really deserve leadership that will not try to mislead them, but will actually have conversations based on applicable and relevant facts.
Ms. Smith, back to you.
Sure, I'm happy to use the same measure, because if you look at our measure, we have increased our net jobs 136,000 since the UCP got elected. So that's, by my count, I guess, 3 times what Ms. Notley was able to do. And there's a reason for that, is because investor confidence has returned. People know that if you elect a UCP government, you're going to get lower corporate taxes. We're not going to come through with surprise taxes. In fact, we're going to have a tax hike guarantee, so that if there is ever a proposal for an increase in carbon tax or personal taxes or sales taxes, it has to be put to the people, because these kinds of policies end up chasing away investment, and it costs average taxpayers and it costs average citizens the most. Ms. Notley won't agree to that, and it's the reason for that is she wants to increase corporate taxes, which are going to, once again, chase out investment just like it did last time.
Don't want to cut you off, but I want to get Ms. Notley in here.
When the UCP announced their multi-billion-dollar corporate handout to corporations, here's what happened. We lost 50,000 jobs, we doubled the deficit, and the economy slowed down. 4 years later, we have fewer corporate headquarters than we started out with. So the fact of the matter is we have lower we will still, under our plan, have lower corporate taxes than Scott Moe, than Doug Ford. But what we'll also have is the money to invest in our education system, something that's been horrifically starved under the UCP. Restore funding to our post-secondary, a critical partner in economic growth and diversification.
We're going to have to end this portion of the debate.
All right, up next, our viewer and wildcard questions. We're going to shift gears a little bit. You're watching the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. Back in just 2 minutes.
All right, so we need to get moving. So we got 30 minutes here. And to get through 15 minutes of video. Segment 3.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, she says. And let me get chapter 3 up. There we go, Ellie. I'm sure you're impressed.
Once again, welcome back to the Alberta Provincial Leaders Debate. So far, we've heard questions on affordability, healthcare, and the economy.
And now it is time to tackle a pair of questions from our audience that we gathered ahead of time.
This question looks at education in Alberta, and this was submitted from Ray Laser from Calgary. Ray wants to know, how specifically is your party going to address the increased enrollment, teacher burnout, increased class sizes, and complexity in Alberta school classrooms? Ms. Smith, we're going to begin with you.
We have had
Calgary
so much
question.
disruption in our education system in the last 3 years. One of the first things I wanted to do is restore stability to the learning environment for our kids. We know one of the most difficult things that our young people are facing is social anxiety and mental health. And so that's part of the reason why we now spend more money than we ever have in our history on education. We have invested in complexity funding for classrooms so that school boards can decide what the best use of that is, whether hiring more teachers or having education assistants or other psychologists. And we're going to make sure that we continue to build more schools. We've built or modernized 106 new schools, and we're going to keep on doing that. Under the Notley government, they only built 47 schools.
Okay, Ms. Notley.
So much of that's not true, but let me start with this.
Like what? I hate when she does that.
Such as.
Yeah. She's done that a few times, but this is the time that I really disliked it because she just said so much of that is not true. So that means some of it is true. If you're so much of, it's not all of that. She didn't say all of that's untrue. So she left the door open for some of it to be true. You then need to follow it up with what specifically is it that you think is untrue instead of a blanket statement. And she just said in the previous segment, you need a leader who's not going to mislead you. Not going to mislead you. But yet her first response since that question is a misleading one. I would really, really, really appreciate it if she would identify what it is that she's talking about a little bit clearer than saying, I don't like what you just said. Tell me that's not true.
Yeah.
Sorry for that,
UCP
right? I didn't
has
like
been
that
doing
statement.
to our school system. I imagine a 6-year-old child in grade 1 in a class that unfortunately has 28, 29, 31, 32 children in it. And she puts her hand up to get help. And she waits for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and nobody comes. So she puts it down, and it happens a few more times, and she stops trying. Over the last 4 years, we've had 35,000 net new children enter our schools, and the UC.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Notley, for that one. I just want to highlight that likely that 6-year-old girl was asking why is there a man dressed up as a woman in my classroom? And nobody was answering that question. I would like to know the rest of that story.
Especially in Calgary.
Especially in Calgary. Yeah, 6-year-old girl asking why is there a man dressed up as a girl here?
Have not hired a single new teacher. In fact, they fired some, and they also fired about 10,000 educational assistants by tweet. We have a plan to fix this, and I look forward to talking more about it.
All right, Ms. Notley, that is your 45 seconds. Let's go to free debate now.
Education is important.
Well, I think that what people might be forgetting is we did have a lot of disruption over the last few years, and that's part of the reason we need to have stability back in our system. I don't think teachers forget, though, that under Ms. Notley, they got no wage increases, 0% year after year. Under UCP government, we gave them a much-deserved 3% 3.75% wage increase. And I think that that's what we're hearing from the front line. They want to be respected. They want to be supported with educational assistance. And they also want to have a little bit of stability so that they have time to deal with the very severe mental health crisis of our kids.
Jump in there, please.
Yeah, there have been profound funding cuts to our education system under the UCP. We now have the most crowded classrooms in the country. That was not the case when we left office, but it is.
Okay, so most crowded classrooms in the country. That is the result of immigration, interprovincial moving,
correct,
and attraction to Alberta. Lots of people bringing their families to Alberta and bringing their children
there
with
wasn't
them.
just all of a sudden a giant baby boom, and all of a sudden now there's tons of more kids that,
And even if there
born.
was a baby boom, that is still a positive growth for Alberta. So the fact that there's more children in the schools, even when we're building more schools, is a direct result of an increase in population. Those are positive. We're not driving people away. People are coming. So yes, you're going to start stretching your services when you have a population increase. Some of it's immigration based on the federal level as well. We've had several groups dropped into Edmonton and to Calgary, which would stretch any system. So what she's referring to here is growth, normal growth within a province that you do want, and then pointing to that as a problem with the system. Well, the system's being strained.
Yeah, not to say that we still need to improve upon it, but don't just dismiss the fact that why is there all of a sudden a lot more children in schools? And yes, the positive flip side of it is that there are more people who've come in. There's probably more, especially if they are immigrants. A good chunk of them may even be coming to create businesses. So because that's part of the immigration system in Canada, you don't just, not everyone's a refugee. We came here to Canada as part of our terms and conditions to become Canadian was to start a business. And that's what we did. So there are many other immigrants who've come to Canada, come to provinces to start a business because it's part of their terms and conditions to become Canadian.
Well, I also think we've had more than our share of refugees replanted here. And that's a different class, which we need to support. It's not a self-supporting class, so we need to support it. And Clay is right. Open border policy is not doing any favors, and he used a Canadian spelling, which is great. Healthcare and housing. Absolutely. Every service, public service, would be impacted through an increase in population. One thing I don't hear either one of these talking about, which is dear to us, is homeschooling. One way to reduce the size of classrooms is to encourage homeschooling, to provide more tools for homeschooling.
And there's tools. They even increased funding. So coming this upcoming school year in September, there's now funding for kindergarten.
Oh,
so there was funding for elementary and up. It's $850 per year. If you are aligned with the school board, you still homeschool, you can still unschool, but if you're connected with the school board, funding given to you to reimburse you for some of your child's activities and materials and lessons. And they've now expanded that to $450, I believe, for kindergarten.
Yeah, because that would be a good way to tackle the overcrowded classroom issue.
Certainly.
You would have more kids working at home. They'd be in homeschooling.
Yeah, we have a great relationship with our school board, and yes, they are based out of Calgary. I was very impressed with the homeschooling support of Alberta.
Yeah.
There was some in Ontario, don't get me wrong, but the fact that there is funding for it, there are homeschooling groups across the province. There are homeschooling groups are recognized by a lot of the places that you go to with regards to you get a discount because you're part of a homeschooling group. Like it's very, very encouraging and very supportive in Alberta.
Yeah, I would like to see Danielle and UPC talk more about homeschooling as an option and encourage people to look into that.
Yeah. It is a sacrifice with regards to a parent to do that. But if it can be done, it's just highly recommended. Highly recommended.
Case now. They, as I said, fired 10,000 educational assistants by tweet on a weekend. They also, in order to cut their budget, they did it on the backs of vulnerable children with disabilities ages 3 to 6 by cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from PUF funding.
Yeah, Alan, this is a good one. And I would really, really like to see Alberta put a moratorium on MAID. I would really, really love Danielle to come out and say, look, if you need to do that, go to Ontario. Because then you'd be right, Ellen. A lot of refugees within Canada would be leaving MAID's supported provinces and coming to Alberta. This one bugs me on a personal level.
So many things wrong with it.
Yeah.
Through the cracks. I've been to schools where teachers and EAs are crying about what they can't get a handle on. So the stress wasn't.
Maybe they're crying because you're there. If people are crying wherever you go, maybe it's because of you.
Now.
Just put it out there.
The stress is this government. We have a plan to hire 4,000 teachers to try to catch up over the next 4 years, 3,000 more EAs, and to restore PUF funding.
All right, let's get Smith back in there.
Well, I would say that Ms. Notley had the opportunity to address class size, and indeed she put forward a proposal to do exactly that, a proposal that the Auditor General said was so badly implemented they couldn't actually track whether it was successful or not, and didn't actually know where the funding went. We know that the very best people to make the decision about what ought to happen in the classroom are our locally elected school trustees. That's why we're giving more funding for mental health, more funding for complexity, more funding for transportation, making sure that every school district has the funding it needs to make its own decisions about what the best mix in the classroom is so that they can meet the local needs.
All right, that is our...
She should announce a mental health funding program for political candidates from the other side so they can get the help they need quicker. They should not wait in line. I think it's time. I think it's time we take that seriously. Political mental health is very important.
For that, unfortunately, we have to get to our next viewer question, and here it is.
And this question comes from Alex from Edmonton.
Okay, as a commentator, as a moderator, you never start your sentence with, unfortunately, we have to get to another viewer's comment. Are you trying to say this comment is annoying you and you don't like it? Just be more aware of how you're moderating.
The choice of words are important.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to end that segment. Now we can go to another comment.
Please tell us one specific policy your opponent has put forward that you agree with and why. Ms. Notley.
These are always fun.
Well, you know, it's a really good question. And I will say this, and I've said it before, it's actually two. I'm going to go with two. So, you know, very early on in the UCP mandate, it was under the former Premier Jason Kenney, they introduced the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation as a means to expand Indigenous participation in our economy. We like it. We're going to expand it, and we're going to expand the number of opportunities that would qualify for that kind of support with Indigenous communities across the province. Another one was they expanded funding of the film and TV tax credit, and that was a good idea. It's brought more excitement into our industry. We will absolutely maintain that, and we look forward to it.
All right, thanks very much, Ms. Notley. Ms. Smith, once again, specific policies that you agree with for the NDP.
I'm very proud of both of the initiatives that Ms. Notley mentioned. The Indigenous Opportunities Corporation has been so successful, I think, in addressing true economic reconciliation. And the film and TV tax credit brought The Last of Us here, which I think all of us feel pretty excited when we watch that on the big screen. What I think Ms. Notley and I would agree with is that we know that there are a number of doctors who are now wanting to specialize, and I completely understand. A lot of time goes into becoming a doctor, and so we're seeing fewer doctors go into family medicine. And so I think we would both agree that we need to move towards team practice, that we need to make sure that we've got team practices for family doctors to work with nurse practitioners, LPNs, and other health professionals to ensure everybody gets the health care they need without having to pay for it.
Okay, thank you both. It doesn't really lend itself.
Okay, you know she never did come up with a policy that she can tote. Maybe it's because there isn't one.
We both agree on team practice.
Well, Notley came up with two, so I guess we're good.
Too much free debate, that question, but we're glad that we got that one in that because we really like that one. So let's head to our next question.
And this is a wild card question on a theme that's outside of our main topics.
Here's Lisa Johnson from Post Media.
Thank you. This election may be decided by who Albertans trust more. Ms. Notley, based on the NDP's fiscal record in government, there are some people who don't trust you to manage Alberta's finances.
Some.
And Ms. Smith, you were found today to have broken conflict of interest rules. Why should Albertans trust you? Ms. Smith, this question goes to you first.
Well, first, what I would say is that when Ms. Notley campaigned last time around, she didn't tell anybody she was going to increase the carbon tax. She brought in a business tax, and she also ended up running up more debt than we've seen of any premier in our province's history. And the results speak for themselves. We saw 183,000 jobs lost in the first couple of years. We had a number of people moving out. We had 13 quarters of people leaving this province. In fact, the energy minister at the time said, well, if you can't find a job in Alberta, go work in BC for a while. That kind of defeatist attitude is not what Alberta is all about. Alberta is back on track. We have more people coming in here than ever before. Our Alberta is Calling campaign is working. We've got more diversification and business investment. We've got to keep that going.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Notley, the floor is yours.
First of all, let me say, I guess there's two things. First of all, I was very pleased to roll out a pretty well thought out costing document for our platform. And that document ensures that over 3 years, we would maintain a cumulative surplus of $3.6 billion. That is in contrast to what the UCP hurriedly rushed out today, which would actually very possibly go into deficit in the third year and is considerably smaller surplus than what we're proposing. And so that calls into question many of the items that they're proposing to Albertans. The other thing I would say, I've been in office since 2008. I have never actually breached the conflict of interest legislation. Ms. Smith cannot say the same.
Well, I guess you did have an MLA who hacked our healthcare system. I can tell you.
Do you
that
really
in
want to
a,
talk about our MLAs?
Well,
like seriously, I do not think you're going to win that.
Sorry, I'm going to stand up for that MLA on this one because the word hack is being used liberally by Danielle there. I actually know this story. So what he did was there's a website that was poorly designed, poorly developed, where you were able to just change some numbers and then pull up someone else's record. I think it was a health website is what he was doing this on. What he did do that was wrong was he wrote a script to go ahead and pull as much information out as he could. What you're supposed to do when you identify a vulnerability on a security level for technology is report it,
That's right.
not leverage it. Now, calling it a hack is a stretch on the word hack. In normal discourse, not discourse, but in normal conversation, people will think the word hack means they went in there and maliciously went around security and did things to break in. He didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. He just leveraged vulnerability in the development of the website, which itself was lacking in security. So I'm just going to stand up there because I do know that he didn't hack, and he also didn't compromise anybody's information because he didn't share it. But what he did do that he shouldn't have done was he leveraged the vulnerability to try and make a point in some way, shape, or form. So I like when they bring up problems on either side, but I also want them to be a little more accurate. This guy didn't hack. He stumbled.
That is also then misleading as well. So just to be clear,
he stumbled across a vulnerability and he did something with it he shouldn't have. He should have just simply reported it. End of story. He wasn't found guilty of any crimes. Okay, he wasn't actually found guilty of a crime. And at the end of the day, I don't have a problem with that. If you find security issues, well, don't leverage them.
That's right. Highlight it. Make that the story.
Yeah.
As opposed to this.
Yeah, but it really got Notley excited there, right? She
was on that.
Want to do.
I have to tell you, when putting together our affordability payments, to have to ask whether it was going to be hack proof from the
Okay, but okay, Danielle, come on, please don't get ignorant like that. To call it hack proof from the NDP, you just need to do better security. Okay, It wasn't hacked; there was a vulnerability, bad programming, and if you need help there, Danielle, call me.
We'll also say is that when she came out with her costing document, it was almost immediately discredited because Todd Hirsch said he hadn't done the analysis on what kind of impact it would have on chasing away investment. Others did. Trevor Toome did. Jack Mintz did. There are several business reporters who did. The Alberta Chamber of Commerce did. And what they have said is that would create instability. And the instability would chase additional investment out. It would chase jobs out. And we would go back and have a rerun of what we did in the period of time that Ms. Notley doesn't want to talk about, which was when she was Premier.
All right, Ms. Notley obviously has thoughts on this. Back to you.
I do, yes. I mean, obviously, the fact of the matter is that many of those people backpedaled on some of that. The credit union has actually said there's not a problem with the increase of the corporate income.
Hold on. I thought backpedaling and changing your mind was the biggest thing you can do. So now she's now saying you can back and change your mind as long as you are using her talking points, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. I'm so confused.
Tax to being the lowest corporate income tax in the country. And indeed, it seems to work okay in Ontario, because heaven knows they are attracting far more venture capital and business than we are in Alberta under the UCP. But I do want to go back to this issue of
have a
the
larger
conflict
market
of interest legislation. This is a fundamentally important issue. Ms. Smith, you were found to have broken the law in order to interfere with the system of justice to assist with somebody who had been charged with attempting to get people to commit violence against police officers.
We're going to let you
so
get a
you
word
talk
in
about
here, Ms. Smith.
instability.
I just want to be clear on that. What Notley is saying here is people shouldn't have due process. Just because you're charged and accused, you must be guilty, and you have no right to have any due process. What Danielle did was she asked what can be done. She didn't order, because she can't, and she didn't imply that they need to do something. She asked what can be done, because she didn't believe the charges were good.
Yeah, she did agree.
Yeah, and just like many of us, we didn't agree that a pastor to be charged for a speech which didn't result in anything.
Yeah, I know.
So look, you're allowed to do. I understand when people think that premiers can't inquire from their attorney general anything. You can't order, but you can certainly.
And I think it was one of the arguments is that it was numerous phone calls, but again, I think it was to follow up and just find out how it was going.
Sure. And again, I don't understand why anybody's trying to make a big deal out of the ability of the premier to inquire into anything. That's their job. It's their job. And if they receive a response to do anything, we have to go through court. Well, then she just learned. She learned what the procedure is. I don't understand why that's a problem. And if that's her only hiccup, put her in for a lot more terms, guys, because if calling and inquiring whether or not something is just is a fault and the only fault, she's my type of person. I'm fine with that.
That does not engender trust. That, more than that,
Ms.
it
Smith,
engenders
go ahead.
fear on the part of Albertans.
Ms. Notley, the NDP, and the CBC lied for months, saying that I was calling Crown prosecutors and my staff were calling Crown prosecutors, and it wasn't true. And that is what the Ethics Commissioner found. Look, I'm a non-lawyer, and I know that I need to be able to talk to my Justice Minister. I'm looking forward to advice on how to be able to do that more constructively in the future. I think that's important for us to be able to get those kind of rules set out. But I will say, we continue to have this issue. I am running on my record. Ms. Notley is running away from hers, and there is a reason for that. The Global Petroleum Survey is one of the surveys that looks at what our business environment looks like. When she got elected in 2015, we were number 3 in the world. By 2018, we were number 43 in the world. This is the reason she doesn't want to talk about her record.
Forgive us, we are running out of time. We're almost at the end of the debate, so we do have to move on.
We do. We have one final wild card question, and here is CDTV's Courtney Theriault.
Well, thanks again. Both parties have insisted they would increase the number of police officers in major centers. But on the surface, that would only allow them to better respond to crimes as they're committed. So in terms of creating safer communities, beyond boots on the ground, what distinguishes your approach from your opponents? And we'll go to Ms.
Sorry, I just want to highlight, you just heard media use the term boots on the ground. Same term that we heard during the convoy, and what it means is authoritative response. It scares me when I hear my own media using marks terms like that.
As well.
Yeah. Guys, boots. Come on.
I was pleased to see that Ms. Smith made the announcement to restore the funding to police officers that the UCP cut at the beginning of their term by hiring the extra 150 officers. We matched that, and then we also went further and said we would also hire 150 more social workers, mental health therapists, those kinds of folks. We would to help with social disorder on our streets, because we know that's worrisome to people, very worrisome. We also, however, have committed to restoring funding for affordable housing. Under the UCP, we've lost 8,000 affordable housing units, and a further 4,000 people were cut off of shelter allowances. And that level of homelessness has created a real crisis, contributing to the concerns around community safety.
All right, Ms. Smith, your time.
Well, first off, we wouldn't defund the police. Again, Ms. Notley has so many defund the police candidates on her platform, on her candidate roster. I've lost count of them as well. The frontline services are demoralized, and we are giving courage and confidence back to our frontline officers. We've embedded sheriffs in both Calgary and Edmonton. We're adding 100 police officers in both Calgary and Edmonton, because we believe that people have a right to take public transit and feel safe. They have a right to go downtown and be able to have a nice dinner or see a game and not worry that they're going to be randomly attacked. And they certainly have a right to walk past an open doorway without having to inhale secondhand crystal meth smoke. We have an approach that is going to make sure that we crack down on public safety and crime and make sure that people feel safe again.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. We've got
Okay, so I didn't like either answer on that one. We need Alberta police.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I care about rural policing.
Yeah, well, both of them were highlighting the cities for sure. But that is also because that's where it is. That's where the crime is. That's where this insane crime is.
Yes,
the random stuff.
Agreed. For rural people in rural communities, we just want a quicker response time, I believe. That'd be a key thing.
I think fear. Yeah, for us, one challenge we had is we had someone steal from us. They came onto our property, stole things, several pieces of property, fuel, all those things were taken. We know who it was, and they actually admitted to it. They said, yeah, I did do that. When we brought it forward to the police, because it was under $5,000 and nothing had a serial number, and this is what the RCMP told me right to my face, they're not going to do anything about it. Even though the officer contacted this individual and did speak to them and did have an admission that, yes, they do have our property, the police did nothing. So I want Alberta police. I want people who live here running the police. I want people who live here working in the police force. With RC, that's not what we get. We get people from all over Canada that are stationed here. So we don't have a community connection to our police force. And I don't think in our case that it should have just been dropped like that.
You need both.
Right. So we need Alberta Police Force or the APP or whatever we're going to call it.
I'd be a proponent for that for sure. And encouraging people to join it. But we have RCMP and nothing wrong with the RCMP. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you were just saying that so they don't come showing up at our door.
But I was surprised. I think it's something I just took for granted coming from Ontario that Alberta has police force.
Right.
Outside of the cities.
No. There's only, I think, 5 or 4. So Ontario, Quebec, I believe New Brunswick, and then the Chinese police force. So there's at least 4. But what I didn't like that they didn't talk on either one of them. The police question came up and they didn't. Tim is here.
Oh, is that what that beep in my ear was?
Yeah. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Your audio is awesome. We're just finishing up the end of the debate. You want to stick around for that last part?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, everybody. This is Tim Moen. And
Tim.
As a firefighter, he was the leader of the Libertarian Party, and we have lots to talk about.
Oh, wonderful. Hello.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
Just the last 5 minutes here.
Sounds good.
About 90 seconds for this free debate. Ms. Notley.
Well, I need to start by saying when it comes to defunding the police, the UCP actually defunded the police. The money that they used to hire the 150 is a restoration of the money they cut in 2019. And that's on top of additional police grants that they cut from municipal governments right when they first got elected. So actual defunding of the police is something that I think they should take a responsibility for.
You know, one thing I'm so proud about with our UCP record is it's what's being known as the Alberta model for a recovery-oriented system of care. Because we know policing is only one side of the story. The other is getting people the help that they need. And my chief of staff is one of the foremost experts on the recovery-oriented system of care. We got rid of the $40 per day user fee that Ms. Notley charged. We've added 10,000 treatment beds. We're building recovery communities, some in conjunction with First Nations partners, and we are going to make sure that every single person who wants addiction treatment has access to a treatment bed. Those two things have to go together.
Quickly, Ms. Notley, you've got 20 seconds to rebut.
Well, listen, I think more recovery beds is a great thing, absolutely. And I actually agree with the fact that the accommodation charge associated with those beds that's been in place for 2 decades is now gone. That's great news, but there's more to it. There's more about wraparound services, transitional housing, those kinds of supports, and those remain unfunded right now.
Okay, thank you. Some spirited debate.
Absolutely.
Love it. I love it. Okay. We are now going to head to our closing remarks. Each leader will have 90 seconds.
And this is one final chance for those leaders to make their pitch to Albertans. We start with Danielle Smith.
I first want to say how much of an honor it's been to be your premier for these last 7 months. I've been overwhelmed by the generosity and kindness of Albertans that I meet every single day. These last 3 years have been difficult for all of us. And now the wildfires are testing our resolve as a people once more. But I know that together we will overcome every challenge we face, whether it's a pandemic, a flood, fire, or economic headwinds. We will take care of one another, and we will move our province forward to a better future. My commitment to each of you, if re-elected, is to serve you with everything I have and to the best of my ability, however imperfect that may be at times. I will continue to focus on growing and diversifying our amazing economy, making life more affordable and our communities safer, and improving healthcare for all Albertans. And I will carefully listen to you and my UCP caucus, because whatever I may have said or thought in the past while I was on talk radio, Albertans are my bosses now, and my oath is to serve you and no one else. I love this province and everything it stands for. We are a land of entrepreneurs and innovators, of pioneers and farmers, of families and communities, a place where the best and brightest come from every corner of the world to join us in building one of the greatest places on earth to live and work and raise a family. From the bottom of my heart, thank you and good night.
Okay, 90 seconds over to you, Ms. Notley.
Well, thank you so much. Tonight, ask yourself, who do you trust to build a better future? Who will focus on the things that actually matter to you? Now, Ms. Smith has spent her entire career campaigning for Albertans to pay out of pocket for basic health care. She's also campaigned to pull Alberta out of the Canada Pension Plan, something that would create huge instability in your retirement. Today, she was found to have broken the law by interfering with our justice system. This is just not how our province should be run. Every day is a new drama. You just don't need to put up with this. Enough is enough. So my offer to you is stable, predictable, thoughtful leadership that you can count on. It's time to get back to the things that matter to people. I will make life more affordable, capping car insurance and lowering your utilities. I will support our entrepreneurial spirit by cutting to zero small business taxes and creating more jobs. And because I'm passionate about making sure your family has health care that you always need without paying for it, I have a balanced, costed plan to make sure you get a family doctor. So that is a better future for Alberta. Now, you may not always agree with me, and I may not have always gotten it right, but I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. If I am Premier again, I will work daily to earn your trust and to focus on your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Notley. Unfortunately.
And that's that, folks. Hi, Tim. Nice to
Hello.
see you. Hi. Sorry about that. We were just trying to get through the last of that debate. We were going through the entire thing. And yeah, you caught us on the last 5 minutes there.
Yeah, no worries. I was kind of following along. Oh.
Okay. So I'm going to let Paula go because Paula's going to get to the kids. Do you want to have any closing comments, especially about the insurance? You wanted to mention the insurance in Ontario.
Yeah, this is a side note for the insurance and capping insurance. They did that in Ontario. Insurance companies find a way. That's all I can say. They implemented it to try and reduce the escalating costs that some postal codes were incurring, primarily Toronto, Brampton, for example, Markham. They found a way by increasing if you paid monthly, your monthly interest charge used to be 3%, I believe, with some companies now it's got up to 4 or 5. They reduced some discounts. So for some places, the claims-free discount went down from 25% to 20%. They will find a way because they're not a non-for-profit. Okay, insurance companies have a bottom line. They will have shareholders. They too want to make money, because an example will be for home insurance. You're not going to put in a claim if you've got a broken window, you've got $1,000 deductible. But if your house burnt down and that's a $600,000, $700,000 payout, insurance companies will pay it. Now, picture when there was a whole bunch of water damage going on in Ontario. For the home insurance, they had a huge payout. Same goes with car insurance. They have issues with regards to accidents, high crime areas. A vehicle gets stolen, they're paying out the cost of that car. So to have a cap on it, they did it, but they recouped it in other ways. And that would just simply be the case if they did that in Alberta.
So you're simply saying it was just fake, like even though your upfront cost may have changed, the overall cost.
They found a way. Like, insurance companies were not happy when politicians were getting on their soapboxes and saying car insurance is going through the roof and now we're going to go ahead and cap it. And they did all that. And so I think it was within a year, insurance companies across the board in Ontario had to now say, sorry, what?
Okay.
So yeah, they find a way because they need to cover their costs and they need to make a profit.
All right. Well, you got our kids to get to now.
Yes, everyone, thanks for having me. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your show, love. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Talk to you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, Tim. Just us. Did you watch the debate live, or did you catch it after?
I did catch. I caught the majority of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched
part
of it live. Well, I mean, it's. I don't know. I think Danielle Smith definitely performed better in the debate. You know, it's on both sides. There's a little bit of government's magic. You know, we can just make things happen by fiat. You know, wave our magic wand of government, and magic things will happen. Prices will come down. Healthcare will increase. All these things that politicians promise. And so, you know, I look at this with kind of a attitudinal disposition of skepticism, let's say, always. And but you know, in terms of performance, I thought Danielle Smith definitely had the better answers, was more composed, and Rachel Notley kind of looked a little. There's a few times where she kind of slung mud, and it didn't make her look good. And the way Danielle handled it, I thought made Danielle look better by virtue of. So I thought Notley and Danielle both worked hard to make Danielle look good in that debate.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's very little I can pick out that Notley nailed. I think she was good at reiterating a certain talking point about the conflict of interest issue and the price of healthcare, but she didn't back those up with why it was a problem for her, and she just couldn't give us an alternative. So
Right.
What is it you're offering that Danielle isn't?
Yeah. And I will say this: I turned into the debate when it was originally aired, right when she was talking about ambulance services, which I'm a paramedic, and you know, Danielle definitely resonated with me, and she hit the nail on the head. I mean, one of the reasons the person I have to thank for being here with you today is Danielle Smith. I just came off a night shift on an ambulance, and it was her reforms that have made it so I'm not, you know, in my bed, an absolute pile of garbage right now, because I work right now I'm stationed in a rural area. Typically, before Danielle Smith became premier, I would have been sucked into Edmonton and doing calls in the metro region all night. And you know, instead I got to sit in my community and serve my community, do a couple calls, but not get sucked into the end. So I'm here because of Danielle Smith's reforms, and that they're working. They're making things marginally better in EMS. It's a very tangible thing. Things are much better at work since she was elected. That's just a fact. So.
And so right off the bat, she's only been here a few months. So she did talk to paramedics. She did listen to you, and she has already implemented some changes.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, as a libertarian, I'd like to see huge structural reforms, but, just on a day-to-day basis, she did things. She ran off the old management who looked at us as kind of objects of compliance rather than clinical practitioners, and put in someone temporarily in that position with the kind of the philosophy and the goal of trying to decentralize a little bit, right? That's kind of the conservative brand, is push things out, not a giant centralized government, but push things out to the community, which is what we've been fighting for years. Now, she can't just, push things back to the municipalities the way we prefer, the way things used to, but she has done some things to allow us to get back to our communities, immediately implemented mandatory offload times of under 45 minutes. So in the past, we'd be sitting in a merge for 4 or 5, well, sometimes even longer, 12, 14 hours. And we're not in our communities. And that has a ripple effect. So if Edmonton Metro trucks are sitting in a merge for hours and hours, that means surrounding communities are getting sucked into Edmonton and doing calls in Edmonton, which means they're not seeing their communities for hours and hours. So it just has a domino effect. So that reform of mandatory offload, and they actually hired EMS nurses in the hospitals to manage those offloads and to get them done. Why hasn't that been done before? Because that's working. The other thing they did, and this was the case last night, was they empowered 811 to actually help people deal with their problems and discourage them from tying up ambulance resources. If you're having insomnia and can't sleep, you don't need an ambulance to pick you up and take you to the hospital. You maybe need connection with your primary care physician. That's something that can wait a few days or at least a few hours. You don't need to type in it. So those are the kinds of calls that were happening last night that we were getting diverted from and canceled on before we even had to go to those calls and tie up a resource. So those are just some little things that she's done that have had a huge impact on our day-to-day life and the morale in our stations.
Wonderful. And how about under Notley? So you were a paramedic under Notley. Did you see these kind of improvements happening as well? Not this specific one, because this was still an issue then, but other ones?
No, we saw pilots and trials, right? So that we would complain about ambulance wait times. That's an ongoing issue, and something would be implemented and it would last for a month and then it would be kiboshed. So things would get better for a month, and then for some reason they'd be kiboshed and go back. And I think what part of the problem is just a fundamental difference in philosophy, right? Like on the left, the NDP tend to trust experts and trust the quote unquote science, and kind of listen to the biggest brains in the room, who are your managers and bureaucrats who have a vested interest in having their pet project rolled out. Whereas Danielle Smith and the Conservatives tend to listen to the grassroots a little bit more. They tend to listen to the man on the street, the guy actually doing the job, to hear what kind of obstacles they're running up against and remove those obstacles. And so I think what happens is, as Rachel Notley tries her darndest to implement policy, she's listening to all the experts, right? And all the experts, the big brains who are at the top of the organizations, and they're very disconnected from reality in a lot of time, and they have their own agendas to serve. They're trying to jockey for position. They're trying to, and so a lot of times these ideas that come from the front line don't serve the managers, and so they don't get implemented. So I think a lot of them are destined to fail. So I think it's this kind of disparity in just worldview and philosophy that had a lot of those things fail for Notley. And I mean, even I'll give you another example. The former health minister, I think it was Sarah Hoffman, the NDP health minister, ran into our one of our executives from our county, that one of my bosses, at some kind of event, and asked our city manager or deputy city manager what we thought about if he'd ever heard of community paramedicine, because that's something the NDP supports. Well, community paramedicine is this idea that community paramedics, instead of constantly just picking up people and hauling them to the hospital, they would deal with urgent care matters in homes. So you can imagine an elderly person with mobility issues who can't get to their primary care physician develops a cough, and this person maybe has COPD or CHF, and that cough, we know in a week or two, is going to develop into a life-threatening pneumonia, and so it needs to be dealt with urgently. It's not an emergency. She doesn't need to go to the emergency department, but probably needs some antibiotics and some follow-up care and some diagnostics. Well, that's something that can be provided in home and that a paramedic could do. And so community paramedicine is this is the direction that EMS is heading, because we're noticing that a lot of our calls we deal with aren't emergencies. They're actually just urgent care calls that are better dealt with in home, provided there's the proper support, rather than taking them to a hospital where they're going to, languish. So this was a great idea. So I was actually put into the role of project manager to get this community paramedic program off the ground in our county, because the NDP thought it was a great idea. But that great idea conflicted with the fact that AHS, the bureaucracy, the elites, the experts, didn't like that. They didn't want they don't want the county running their own community paramedic program. That's a healthcare issue, and that's a provincial issue, and that's something only the big heads in Edmonton at the top of the AHS hierarchy ought to be in control of and managing. And so it ended up failing. Now, I suspect things would have been different had Danielle Smith been in there and really, provided a way for us for the county to manage this program itself. And so, again, it's all like, what would I say? The intentions, right? Best of intentions from Notley and the gang, rainbows, unicorns, and we can make it happen by magic. And that's where the kind of the reality gets lost. It's this idea that government is magic and we can wave a wand and make things happen. And it doesn't work that way, especially when you adopt the philosophy that the elites ought to be controlling everything.
Absolutely, and they are very magical with their beliefs. It's odd. Maybe they need a little bit more religion in their life. So you're a paramedic and you're a firefighter. First, I want to say thank you very much for the firefighting side of things during these wildfires. I know you were very involved. You were very busy, and thank you so much for making time for us today with your busy schedule. No, we really do appreciate it, and you guys did a wonderful job. No lives lost, right? Just some property.
No, yeah, and I mean, I've been dealing with wildfires in my own county, east of Edmonton, Strathcona County, and our guys saved. I mean, there was about 6 really close calls where we were able to, thanks to quick action, and we were able to save houses, and definitely no property was lost in our county except maybe a few like outbuildings. And we managed to keep everyone safe. So we got really lucky. Our resources were stretched thin to the max, but we've got top-notch guys, and so we were able to save that property.
Yeah, in Nebraska County, we did a wonderful job as well. We managed to save Drayton. We managed to stop the fire right at the southeast end of the town. We lost a few residential buildings that were just outside of town, but that's it. So wonderful. No lives lost. I don't even think we lost a pet. Great job to you and your team. And of course, you had provincial support. You had Alberta wildfire support on that. Did you find they were lacking? Did you find that we need to do an overhaul of Alberta wildfires as well?
Well, actually, we didn't have any of that support in our county because we don't really have any crown land or public land, or at least not a lot of it. So most of the stuff we were dealing with is on forested areas that covers a bunch of acreages and different things like that. So we were pretty much on our own for it. I think our brass did consult with SRD to talk about tactics and, you know, like how much work, for example, do you do to overhaul this stuff? Like we have guys out today, and I'll probably be out tomorrow dealing with hot spots that are still, I mean, it gets into the peat, and in some places around here, the peat is like 8 feet deep. And so you're dealing with excavators and bucket and tankers of water to get out one little hot spot. So how much resources and how much time do we spend putting out these hot spots, or do we let nature take its course? How much, all those kind of risk management things, SRD certainly helps us with. But in terms of actual boots on the ground, not so much.
Well, thank you very much. A great job.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. So some people here know you from your political career. You're not just a paramedic. Well, I don't want to say just, a very important position, but you're obviously a public servant. You want to help the public, help your community, get involved. The paramedic, firefighter, and you were also the leader of the Libertarian Party. 2014, you ran. You want to kind of let everybody know about a little bit about that?
Well, sure. I mean, look, I look at it as kind of an extension of my day job. You know, as a firefighter paramedic, I confront, let's say, mindlessly destructive forces of fire and disease and trauma, and I see, nature, and I see government as kind of a mindlessly destructive force of nature as well, that needs to be confronted. And I certainly saw how it was tearing apart my community. And for example, actually how I got started in politics originally was pushing back against the provincial government's plan to centralize EMS, to take over EMS as a provincial responsibility rather than a municipal one, because I could see very clearly how that would degrade our service level and remove us from the equation. And I mean, we're the people that live in the community, that have family in the community, that are very invested in our community being protected and served. And it wasn't clear to me at all. I lived in Fort McMurray at the time. It wasn't clear to me at all why someone in Edmonton would be able to do a better job of protecting and serving our community by handing us the rules and the protocols and the funding that we ought to operate from. So I spoke out against it, and I explained. We had some town halls, and that was my first foray into politics. And up until then, I had been fairly apolitical. I was libertarian in that, you know, I looked at government as a destructive force in the world, kind of an institution that eventually humankind would grow out of, just like we grew out of slavery. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, you know, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And so, you know, it has its ups and downs, but at a certain point, we recognized slavery was immoral, and we kind of haven't gone back. Well, I think the same thing's going to be true of the state. I think eventually we're going to recognize that, hey, it was just a criminal cartel all the time, and it was obvious, and we kind of, you know, we'll be scratching our heads wondering how we ever adopted this as a central organizing theme of our society. But, you know, I recognized that it was something that was eventually going to fall away. But I said, I was kind of always like, well, this is going to be a multi-generational thing, focus on peaceful parenting, focus on raising my kids to be free thinkers. And, you know, that's how we get to decide. But in the meantime, politics, as much as I left politics alone, it wasn't leaving me alone. It was destroying my profession. And so I recognized at that point that, okay, maybe I ought to actually get engaged in the fight a little bit and confront some of the things that are going on. So yeah, I stood up, fought for my community to hold on to EMS. We managed to actually hold on to our dispatch center, which was a semi-win, I guess. But here we are, and we've seen the problems with EMS and healthcare, and you know, everything is as predicted under centralizing and having government own the means of producing this stuff. It's fallen apart and requiring larger and larger sums of money to hold it together. And eventually it's one giant point of failure, and it will fail, and there'll be much suffering and gnashing of teeth. And it'd be nice to throttle that back before the bubble bursts. But, you know, I'm kind of skeptical it was. But from that, I I became an ardent community defender in Fort McMurray. So we would have all these Hollywood elite come to Fort McMurray to bash the oil sands. I had a video production company at the time. I offered, I worked with Neil Young and Daryl Hannah on a project they were doing, became their director of photography for Fort McMurray. And, they were wanting to do a video about how we're destroying the planet. But I thought if I could get in on these projects, I could point them to all the great things that were going on in our community. The fact that there's an environmentally friendly carnival in town that runs off the used cooking oil from the restaurants in town that has a solar power stage. I thought, Neil, wouldn't it be great to have you sing on this stage powered by sunlight in the middle of dirty oil country? As an artist, you must find that fascinating. Like, why is there this environmental consciousness in this place that's supposedly wrecking the planet? How does that emerge? Why should we pay attention to that? Different things. Just throw a little cognitive dissonance their way. And of course, Neil Young didn't want to have anything to do with that. All he wanted to do was shoot oil sands porn, all the ugly, nasty stuff that he could. Then he went off to Washington, D.C. and he bashed my community. He said we were committing genocide. He said, we're ruining the environment and killing people and all this stuff. And I took umbrage with that, wrote an article that got picked up by the Huffington Post and went viral. And it had a lot of libertarian themes in it. And next thing you know, I'm being kind of headhunted by political parties who, because they saw me on the news, they saw me doing interviews about my experience, thought, yeah, this guy's fairly well spoken. He's talking about stuff that matter to us. Why don't we recruit him as a candidate? And I said no. I said absolutely not. I'll refer you to some of this article I wrote before about why I think voting might be actually immoral. It's kind of like encouraging them or something like that, or lending. I kind of look at democracy as a criminal conspiracy. If you or I were to engage in democracy in our neighborhood, for example, well, we'd be voting to elect me to rob the neighbors and distribute money to my cronies, right? And that strikes me as criminal conspiracy. If you or I, as private members of the public, were to engage in democracy outside of the government, we would be arrested for criminal conspiracy. Well, I didn't see why that would change just because I'm voting for a criminal cartel that everyone views as legitimate. But anyways, they convinced me that, look, your voice is missing from that stage. You're not going to win, obviously. You're not, and you're not voting. You're not encouraging criminality. What you're pushing back against it. Why not stand on that stage, deliver a message, an unpopular message that people need to hear, and shift culture? I mean, one of my heroes was Ron Paul, from the U.S. congressman, and he wasn't a hero because he was a congressman and he was able to pull some legislative levers and make people free. He was a hero because he stood on a stage and bravely said unpopular things, and he shifted culture, and he created a market demand for smaller government. And so once I recognized that, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'll run. I have 1.5 years to figure it out, but I didn't have 1.5 years because my member of parliament, Brian Jean, resigned 2 days after I made that commitment, and I was thrown into a by-election. I had no idea what I was doing. I assembled a team, and we started producing memes. And the meme that really got me some traction was, I want gay married couples to be able to protect their marijuana plants with guns. And that slogan got me on Fox News and CNN. This Hour's 22 Minutes made fun of me. And so next thing you know, I'm getting all this attention, and our party happened to have a convention about right during that time. And I was nominated and elected handily leader of the party. So it was a very fast, no, there's absolutely no way I'll go into this, to all of a sudden running for prime minister. It was a few short months. And so it was kind of a surreal ride. And then I was leader of the party for about 7 years. I think I stepped down in 2020 or something like that. So, or 2019. It was 2019. It was before the pandemic hit. So, yeah.
And this is one of your quotes: "Government is a mindlessly destructive force of nature that needs to be confronted." You still feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely do feel that way. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I
Didn't
mean,
get any since then?
what's that?
It didn't get any better since this quote?
It hasn't gotten any better. No, believe it or not, it hasn't gotten better. It has grown as predicted. I mean, fire grows, it consumes, it destroys, and it doesn't get smaller on its own. You know, it has to actually be confronted, and you actually have to put the wet stuff on the red stuff. And you know, a lot of people, you know, part of, I think some conservatives think that we gotta fight fire with fire. They say, right, that we have to act like the left, and that's a mistake I see conservatives doing that has never served them, and it's definitely not serving. I can tell you as a firefighter, we don't fight fire with fire. We fight it with water. We fight it with the opposite of fire. And so whatever it is that the left's doing, you need to do the opposite. If they're creating hate, divisiveness, you know, oppression,
Love and unity.
they're demonizing you as everything that's wrong with the world. Well, you kind of have to do the opposite, I believe.
I agree completely, and this is what opposition is. This is what we're supposed to be doing. The Libertarian Party has some support in the U.S., not so much in Canada. Why does it seem like there's this different type of mentality around libertarianism?
Sure. Well, I mean, libertarianism is kind of in the U.S. DNA, right? I mean, you could all say that, look, the U.S. was actually founded when a bunch of libertarians picked up guns and killed a bunch of conservatives and kind of took over their country, right? And so
1776.
it's right. It's in their DNA. It's like, yeah, liberty or death kind of thing. I mean, you've got a state whose slogan is "Live free or die." You know, we don't see that kind of foundational story or DNA in Canada, and so it's certainly it's there in the American fabric. It's part of their nation's story, and ours isn't that way at all. Ours is more about the taming of the land or something like that, and you know, and you know, and then there's some structural things too that make it easier, I think, for a libertarian party to flourish. One, they, you know, a guy like Ron Paul can stand, who ran for the Libertarian Party initially, and then he eventually ran for the Republican Party and got elected as congressman. He's able to stand up in Congress as a Republican and say very libertarian things. He's basically, you know, preaching our message. Well, you can't do that as a conservative member of parliament. You
No,
can't.
around.
No, well, even just how the parties are structured, right? Because even myself, and this is one of the things that always bothered me as party leader. One of the requirements for you to be a candidate in my party is, and this is an Election Canada requirement, is that the leader or a designate of the leader signs off on you. So I have to approve of you before you can run for my party. So this engenders loyalty to the leader rather than loyalty to your constituents or to some ideas or something like that. And so in Canada, yeah, you like to be in caucus, let's say, or part of the gang requires the tacit support of the leader. And if I don't want to give you my support because I don't really like you, and I think you've been saying some bad things about me, or even you've been saying some things that don't go along with my agenda, well, I'm going to use that mechanism of control to keep my people in line. And we saw this, for example, in the Conservative Party with, I don't know if you remember Brent Rathgaber, who's a Conservative member of Parliament from St. Albert, and this would be about a decade ago now. He proposed a very modest transparency bill that would allow the press to request parliamentary staffers' salaries, and basically it was like a sunshine list of how much parliamentary staffers would make. Now, Stephen Harper didn't like this for some reason, and it went to caucus, it went to the back rooms, and they whittled it down. He said by the end of it, it would have, the concessions he got would have only allowed like the press to find out 6 parliamentary staffers, and he was very upset by this, didn't like it, spoke out against this, and demanded transparency, and he was kicked out of the Conservative Party. Well, that can't happen in the U.S., right? I mean, they just can't do that. So now he's sitting at an independent. He runs again as an independent. Of course, as an independent, you're very unlikely to. I don't think an independent has ever been elected. I don't in Canada. He was a very popular member of Parliament, and he lost as an independent. So that is, I think, another reason is just the way the party structure is. But it's it's endemic. It's right there in the U.S. DNA, whereas it's not so much in Canada.
Do we need our own 1776? This is something that Zach Schmidt and a couple other people have brought up. We didn't have our independence from the monarchy, didn't actually set up ourselves to be like a republic. We kind of didn't do that. Do we need that? Is it time?
Well, I personally don't want to go down the violent revolution pathway. It's funny. I moderated the vice presidential debate for the Libertarian Party in the U.S. And that was a question I asked them. I said, look, you guys had your 1776 moment. You had your revolution. You killed a bunch of people. You created independence on the OECD.
Now.
Right, on the OECD Freedom Index, though, you and Canada, not so much. There's not very much separation. So was all that killing and violence worth it, given that the results are not that different? And when do you personally recommend violent revolution? And so I thought that was an interesting question. Of course, they all said it was definitely worth it, and we recommend it when government gets too big or whatever. Look, here's what I hope. I hope that there can be a peaceful revolution, one that requires decentralization. One of the messages I preach regularly, and I actually just spoke at an event called Capitalism and Morality in Calgary over the weekend. Maxime Bernier was there. Some Austrian economic professors were there. Derek Fildebrandt from the Western Standard, a few people. And one of the things I talk about is that, look, what does the government require from you as an individual to grow? It requires you to be dependent, living in fear, anxious. It requires you to feel completely helpless. It wants you to be atomized and alone and disconnected from everyone. So you reverse engineer that to be a counter-revolutionary. You become independent. You love instead of hate. You confront your fear and live a life of gratitude and with a positive energy. And so these are the counter-revolutionary things. And rather than, I'm not sure that simply overthrowing the government is enough, because you overthrow the government, you still have a huge market demand for whatever the government was providing, right? It's supported by this market demand. People want the government to do something. And, we saw this very plainly in the pandemic. And, for the first 6 months, I remember it was very difficult to be a libertarian. I heard a bunch of conservatives chime in with the left and say, there's no libertarians during a pandemic. We need the government to do stuff, right? Well, now at the end of it, it turns out the pandemic might have created more libertarians than I ever could have. But, this idea that we can just make government go away or something like that, I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I think what has to happen is we need to be focused on solutions, right? And so building our own communities of freedom, and that make the government essentially irrelevant. And so I have a friend, for example, who's doing something like this in Saskatchewan. He bought up 500 acres of farmland. His plan is and he's selling lots in 1 square foot sections. So if you want to buy 100 square feet, you can, and pitch a tent on it. If you want to buy 5,000 square feet, build a house, you can. And his idea is to create a private municipality with his own, police or security, emergency services, that follows a philosophy that he likes. And so now you've created this zone of freedom, or anarchy, even if you want to use a loaded term. And he's made government irrelevant because he's providing incredible value. We've got a community here. We've got all the nice things you could want in a community, and we don't have the top-down authoritarian control, and we have direct access to justice because there's an explicit contract I have as the infrastructure owner of the city with the individuals that have bought. I don't have to wait for a 4-year cycle if the city owner isn't living up to his end of the bargain or something like that, right? So these are the kinds of things. I mean, we've got Milton Friedman's great-grandson, Patrick Friedman, engaging in this giant project called seasteading, where they're building all these offshore platforms and building little micronations that you take your land, your barge or your platform and tie it up to this micronation. Don't like the rules, you move to the next micronation or you create your own micronation. You know, they're going to be doing all sorts of economic activity, whether it's research or harvesting seaweed and biofuels and all these different things. Uber completely disrupted the taxi cartel, right, by going around regulations. And so we just see how technology over time, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, is disrupting the way we look at money. So, you know, I think that the future of freedom is more likely to be a counter-revolutionary act, like someone providing something of incredible value to others that makes government irrelevant, more than it's going to be, you know, changing a tipping point of people's minds and having some kind of revolution. But I will say, you know, I caught a little bit of the show earlier, and your co-host, I can't remember her name, she was talking about how many times she's going to roll her eyes. And, you know, I'm seeing this more and more in people and my colleagues, how much they're rolling their eyes at what the government's doing and what just bureaucrats around them are doing. And it reminded me of this thing Jordan Peterson said recently about how one of the surest signs you can tell divorce is imminent is one spouse rolls their eyes while the other one's talking. And so it's encouraging to me, all the eye rolling that's going on. Let's just say that. And I think that's a good thing that people,
Yeah, no, she's searching for the answers wherever they can be because they're not hearing it straight in front of them. So when Notley speaks, my wife is looking for the answers somewhere else because she's not seeing them in front of her. So that's my wife, Paula, who was co-hosting.
Oh, okay.
Today. Yeah, and she's got quite the opinion on the current election. So a couple of things that you said there, which I found very interesting. You mentioned how Uber kind of went around regulation. They did more than that. They actually violated regulations in some places as well.
Right.
So they weren't afraid to push the status quo and to push the authorities, which I think is kind of where we need to head with this. So when we do things like the Sovereignty Act here in Alberta, isn't this kind of heading in the right direction for a peaceful revolution where we're basically saying, thanks, but no thanks, we're good. We'll tackle these issues ourselves. You may have your recommendations, you may have your ideas, you may have your agenda, but we're good. Thanks, but no thanks. What do you think about that? Are we heading in the right direction if we're pushing like that, pushing back to Ottawa like that?
Well, I think so. I mean, I like to see more people talking about separatism, but I mean, we've been talking about separatism for a long time. There's always been separatists, and it's been a fairly disorganized bunch, right? It's not real clear. But I am encouraged that actually now we're seeing a sitting government talking more about pushing back against Ottawa. I mean, Danielle Smith hasn't come out outright said I'm a separatist and I want autonomy, but she has said we need more independence from Ottawa, and I'm willing to push back against Ottawa. And that is a step in the right direction. And that is really, you know, the only thing that can protect us is decentralization. You know, and we have far too many countries in this world. We need like a lot more countries, as far as I could tell. But what, you know, and the globalists are trying to form us into one country. We should be trying to form ourselves into as many countries as we can, separate from, you know, and have as much decentralization as possible. So I think you're right. I think Danielle Smith is headed in the right direction. I just hope it's sustainable. You know, part of the thing I worry about is she's also spent a lot of money. You know, the arena deal and COVID stimulus, or you know, the money she's handing out to people for the inflation reduction is, I mean, all these things she knows this. These are not things that are in line with the principle. These are things that undermine her principle, if anything. So part of my worry is that we have seen kind of libertarian friendly conservatives in the past, and they eventually turn on libertarians. We saw it with Stephen Harper. We saw it, even with Max Bernier to some degree. At the end of the day, they throw out principle for pragmatism. They're like, well, look, we can't afford to have the left in there, so yeah, I'm going to have to undermine the principle a little bit, get those Calgary votes. I need to secure that arena deal to, get more votes from Albertans. I need to hand out a bunch of free checks and let them know that I got their back. And I definitely can't talk about making you pay for healthcare, right? That was a big part of the debate, was Danielle Smith convincing everyone that, no, it's going to be completely socialized. Don't worry about it. It's going to be as commie as it comes under Danielle Smith. Don't you worry your pretty little heads off. You won't have to pay a red cent. Well, I mean, I wish she was as bad as the NDP said she was. I wish she was going to privatize things. I wish, it would be nice for I wish she could just legalize stuff at least, right? Talk about legalizing healthcare. This is the messaging I did as a libertarian leader when confronted with, because Poli-Sci 101 says you never threaten Canadian healthcare. It's part of being Canadian. As much as being gun is part of being the American, being. So, I would always approach it from a different angle. Say, look, I want to provide healthcare, and right now government's blocking me. I can't provide healthcare services to consenting adults because the government says I can only do that when I'm working for them under their strict and narrowly defined things. So, can we at least legalize healthcare? I wish Danielle Smith would talk about some of that stuff. But so the worry I have, I guess, is that we get Danielle Smith in there. She does a few things, but in sacrificing her principles, she's planting the seeds, watering the root of the problem a little bit, which conservatives always do. And when the left resurges, they're going to use that and take it then some. I'll give you an example. A more clear example of what I mean. So I think it was in Louisiana, they just banned drag show story time or something like that at libraries or from schools, or I can't remember, but it's all done in the name of child welfare. And I agree. Like, I would never take my kids to one of these things. Like, I've been to drag shows. They're sexy, burlesque, adult entertainment, and it's weird that this stuff is being foisted on kids. And I certainly would never take my kids to it. But the conservative answer here is, let's use government to solve this problem. We'll point the guns at government and we'll ban it. But the problem is, you still have the types of parents that would take the kids to drag shows, raising these kids. So don't you think that's a problem, Mr. Conservative? And if that's a problem, shouldn't you now use guns of government to deal with that problem, just like you did with this other? It's for the kids, after all. Like, we need the government to protect the kids. How far do you take it? And do you really want that government needs to protect the kids when a leftist is in charge and you've got a trucker convoy full of kids and they're talking about confiscating the kids from a trucker convoy? So, this is the problem. It's like conservatives, that they want to use the government to solve all the problems and all the ills that they see in the world. Danielle Smith seems to be doing that, a little bit of that as well. And I just worry that it's like Michael Malice said, conservatives are progressives driving the speed limit. And what we really need are people who have the courage to start taking on some pretty major reforms that are going to be unpopular and uncomfortable. And if we don't do that, eventually reality is going to make those reforms for us, and it won't be fun and it won't be pretty.
Well, this is kind of what you did, right? So you saw an issue in your own world in paramedics. You saw an issue, and then you stood up into your community and you said, hey, look, I have some possible solutions. Let's talk about this. Let's bring this forward. How do we get more Canadians to respond like you did? How do we get more people to come out of the woodwork like you did to say, hey, look, I can see this in my neighborhood. It's in my community. I can help. I'm willing to help. I've got the energy to help. Give me a chance. Let's chat. How do we get more people like you to stand up and do that? Because I think we're missing that level of not even professional, but common folk to enter the conversation, to enter the House of Commons, and to continue that kind of conversation. So how do we inspire people to be more like you and stand up and do something about it?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. That's $1 million question. I want to say that Justin Trudeau has done more to encourage that over the past 3 years than
I'm here because of
anyone
his
else.
statement. Yeah,
Right.
so
Right. Yes.
on February 22nd, when he came out to the press and said, "Look, if you don't like," he said it en français, so you have to listen to it en français. But if you didn't like what I'm doing, go to the polls, become a candidate, get support from people, run against me. That's why I'm here.
Right.
That's exactly my call to action. So I think you're right. Maybe Justin may have helped some more. But how do we actually get some more inspiration behind some of these candidates like you, and then support them? So not just encourage them to come forward, but actually get some grassroots support behind them. How can we kind of tackle that one?
Well, I mean, there is no easy answer here, and part of the problem is that part of the temptation, I guess, is that we look for the easy answer. The easy answer is that there's a handful of puppet masters controlling the strings and everything the world did, the globalists, and it's George Soros and it's Klaus Schwab, and if we just get rid of these guys and replace them with our guy, then everything will be good. Well, no, I wish it were that easy. It's not. The problem is, the system itself. And if any one of us are in those positions, if I were in Danielle Smith's position, how could I say that I'd be doing anything different? I'd either be doing the old Tim Moen show and definitely not getting elected premier, or I'd have to make some concessions and give out some free stuff and run some polls and adopt my policy and do what Danielle Smith's doing, and just look to make marginal change within the firmly within the boundaries of the Overton window I can. And again, I don't think that is going to do it, and that's all driven by the temptation to, we need immediate change, we need, right, and like, we just need to get Justin Trudeau out of there. And I heard this over and over again throughout my political career, let's call it. And actually, I've been hearing it my whole life. Like, now is not the election to vote your principle. We have to be pragmatic here. We have to get the left out. We have to vote against our worst evil. And I've been hearing that for bloody decades. And yet government continues to grow. And my argument is that it continues to grow because we keep going after these short-term gratifying wins and imagining that we're making progress. What actually needs to happen, what is the difficult and challenging truth of all this, is that it starts with the man in the mirror, right? If we're saying that the problem is this centralized top-down control, well, it's not a simple matter of replacing that top-down control with our own version, because in order to do that, we have to sacrifice everything that makes us human and sell our souls to get there, and basically defeat the whole purpose. What we have to do is the very difficult thing of working from the man in the mirror up, and deal within our sphere of influence. So, what I would challenge, I guess, the audience members to do is look at the influence you can have in your own life. In what way are you being inspirational, being a light, being attractive to people around you and to your message? And what can you do to improve that? And then how can you and the people around you that you've convinced organize to do that same thing and expand your sphere of influence further and further? That is where I would look. If I could have a magic wand or a billboard in every town, it would have something to do with taking personal responsibility in your own life to be the kind of change. I mean, this is as cliche as it comes. It's cliche as hell, but it's cliche for a reason. It's because I believe it's the truth and it works. Be the change you want to be in the world. And that's hard to do, because that doesn't get us change right now. That gets us change maybe, hopefully, down the road, maybe even generations from now. But right now we're faced with this carbon tax and all these draconian things that Trudeau's going. Maybe we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can be the love and light in the world around us, but also push back publicly against this stuff. But I'm just worried that that this whole thing we've been sold on, that the only way we can get meaningful change is to engage in this democratic process and get the right guy, get our guy in there. That has never worked. In fact, it's only ever shot us in the foot. Government has continued to grow, even when we get libertarian leaning conservatives in power. It's never gone the other way. And if it has gone the other way, it's just by nature of reality of the economy collapsing or contracting because of government dumb fuckery or whatever, and that is, and so it's never been done intentionally, and so I doubt it can ever be done intentionally, because I can't imagine how I would do it, how I could get that and not have been hamstrung by my own actions to get there, at a
Well, it sounds
violated
like
so many principles. Yeah.
well, it sounds like Canadians are close to coast. They have the Maple Leaf fans mentality, which is just the next season or the next
Yeah,
term.
yeah.
You can get there to the next one, everything will be fine. But after 40-something years, you should recognize that maybe that's not working. You mentioned that maybe, push against anything that the left does, but I'm going to actually push back on that one a little bit to you. What the left have been excellent at for the last 50 years is educating us in our children and separating from the parents. So for the last 50 years or so, this is what they've been doing. I think we need to take a page out of that book and reverse what they did there, which is to bring the parents and children back together. It should be a pared down society, and we should be raising our children.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the state wants families broken up. It wants to become a surrogate husband. It wants to become a surrogate parent. And, it doesn't serve the state to have intact families and have that be the because that makes its role smaller. And so it incentivizes single motherhood in all sorts of ways through, welfare to family law to, public schools are a tool of the state to separate kids from their family and to indoctrinate them into, and this was their expressed purpose. I mean, you don't have to look to a conspiracy for this. And it just makes sense. The state is always going to do the things and support the things that grow it, shrink family. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. Do the opposite of what the state does. And instead of separating families, bring them together. And look, the things being a counter-revolutionary here, or I guess it'd be a revolutionary, isn't easy because all the incentives are against you. Like if you are a wife and you're not that satisfied with your husband, well, you can leave him. It's no fault. You can unilaterally break the marriage contract, and get paid, like for the next 18 years. And so why would you want to stay in a marriage where you're at the moment not happy? The revolutionary thing is to stay committed to your vows and work through it as a couple and do the difficult thing. And so this is why my method isn't all that popular. It's because it's so hard to do, right? It's like, people would rather take a pill to lose weight and get jacked than actually go to the gym and lift heavy things and grind that out for, years.
Absolutely. And I think you're dead on. If it's a hard job, that's the one we need to do. When it becomes easy, you're on the wrong path. And it can be as simple as that. So wrap up. So thank you so much, Tim. I would like to have you back. Maybe we can do another full episode. I really wanted to talk more about my independent candidacy. I would like to talk more about where you came from on the libertarian front, where you are today, where you might be in the future. So if you don't mind, I'll reach out and maybe we can get you back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy.
Well, thank you, Tim. Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Problem. Thank you.
So I'm going to drop and I'll chat with you in a little bit. Okay, bud?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Well, folks, that was a full action-packed episode, full 3 hours. We did the extension, and I've been getting the notes that we're running out of time. So thank you very much, Ellie, for keeping us on time. Thank you very much for Tim for showing up. Thank you very much to Paula for showing up. And thank you to Rachel and Danielle for giving us something to talk about today. This election is a turning point for us. I believe we do vote in NDP. The separatist movement will come full force, but if we keep UCP in, I think we can work on sovereignty. So thank you all very much. We're going to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to have a guest who has had trouble with the healthcare system. He's an unvaxxed, disabled person who's had nothing but troubles with the system because of his choices. So we'll speak to Adam tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Have yourself a wonderful day, and remember, bless.